Hey everybody, welcome to Beyond Top Secret. Tonight we have a very special guest joining us, someone who has been deep diving into the mysteries of our time. He's the host of Polarity, a YouTube show dedicated to unraveling the mysteries of our time. Head over to Polarity on YouTube, subscribe, and check out all the great content Josh has been producing. I'll leave a link below in the comments for everybody to check out. Can't recommend enough to go over and check out his channel. He's doing absolutely fantastic work on this subject, and you guys will all be in for a treat by checking out his channel. So here's Josh. Josh, how's everything going tonight?
Good, yeah. Thank you for that lovely and flattering intro. It's good, man. It's midday here in Australia, and yeah, I'm excited to have a chat with you and talk about all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, man, there's certainly a lot going on in UAP world, so we're gonna have a lot to get into. But first, I just want the viewers, the people who haven't seen your channel yet, and just for them, you just started this channel in November, and you're already up to quite a few subscribers and growing every day. So you're definitely making a splash in UAP world, and I don't think it'll be long before you're one of the leading channels on the subject. So
Thank you.
yeah, absolutely, man. So before you're some superstar, I thought we'd give everybody a chance to get to know you a little bit. So where'd you grow up, and did anything you growing up kind of shape your interest in the mysterious?
I can't say anything in particular shaped the interest. So I grew up in the southern state of Australia, which is called South Australia, and I can't necessarily say anything in particular shaped it, but I can say that from a very young age, I had this very strong feeling of like not fitting in or like not belonging here, which I feel like led me to looking into, other things, other ways of life, other things that seem to not fit in with the way that with society and the way everything else is going. So I feel like not UFOs and aliens directly, but there was always just kind of this inner feeling of like what else is out there, and perhaps that's where I belong. And I can't explain where that feeling comes from, but it's certainly been there for as long as I can remember.
Yeah, that's really interesting, man. I was kind of the same way growing up. I was always involved in sports and had lots of friends, but there was always something like a curiosity that there's
Yeah.
more out there. And once I found it, just by kind of listening to Art Bell on Coast to Coast when I was a kid, I was like, I found it. There was just something about the unknown and just something that's not even tangible. Um, just kind of a feeling that there's more out there. There's more out there to be discovered. There's more to life than what we're aware of. But that is pretty cool, man. What were you like as a kid? Were you a troublemaker?
Yeah, but not in a sense of like bad stuff. I was the kid in school where all the teachers would say things like, Josh is really clever. He has a lot of potential, but he doesn't use it. He just wants to clown around. Like, he's just not interested, which is true. And I feel like I've always been able to succeed at things that I am passionate about. And not necessarily on like a giant scale, but like when I've applied myself to something, I'm able to generally do well at it, but I'm only able to apply myself to something that I'm genuinely passionate about or genuinely interested in. Otherwise, I just can't do it. And I feel like that's why I did struggle quite a bit in school, and why I've probably had not difficulties, but like I've had a few different jobs up until this point because I'm doing this full time now, and each job has kind of given me a little bit of satisfaction for a little while, but it even through to that point, it never really felt like I could never see myself doing it for the rest of my life. So yeah, I feel like that interest kind of comes and goes, but when you really find something that you are really passionate about, which for me is this, um, that interest, I mean, yeah, that interest has been there since I was about 13 years old, in this kind of stuff. So this is like one of the very few things in my life that's been like a constant.
That's really awesome, man. It sounds like you found your calling, and just at the
Yeah,
right
it certainly
time
feels that way.
because yeah, absolutely. And you're lucky you're able to pursue it now, and it's at a time when I think people are interested in the subject more than ever. So there's going to be a wide audience to hear smart people talk about the subject and kind of guide people to what's going on in UAP world and what disclosure might mean for people. Because I think we're getting pretty close to finding out some pretty big truths. But being that
Yeah,
you're in
it
Australia, oh yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, it certainly feels that way. And, in a way, I feel like people sometimes go like, oh yeah, we've heard that before. And I agree, we have heard that before a lot, that, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. But I think if we are being realistic, things are very different now to how they were even 5 years ago. I mean, and 10, 20 especially. So
Absolutely.
I think the whole it's coming really, I mean, I think it's already started, to be honest. Like if we look at where we are right now compared to 5 or 10 years ago, it has started. But I think people expect there to be like like the president at the lectern going, "Okay, everyone, we're not alone." Rah, rah, rah. Like it's not going to happen like that. It's not going to be an overnight
Right.
thing, because I think the impact and the knock-on effects that come with this are going to be so big that they can't like dropping it would kind of be like the equivalent of like a cognitive nuclear bomb. Do you know what I mean? Like it's
Absolutely.
it needs to be done slowly, because I mean people like you and me, we could probably have it all dropped at once and we would probably be like, oh yeah, we kind of knew half of this stuff for the last 10 to 15 years, right? But
Right.
there are people still out there who think UFOs are like just a funny myth in the X-Files. Like people still think that. So
Exactly.
for all of this information to be dumped at once, it would literally like make people's minds like short circuit and people would melt down. So I think it has to be rolled out slowly, and I think that process has begun.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, the government has admitted there's UFOs slash UAP. Like the government has actually admitted. Now they haven't come right out and say they're aliens, but there's
No.
craft in the sky that we can't identify. They're not ours. They
Mm.
don't belong to a foreign adversary. So that leaves one option. I just
That's
don't. I think people are so absorbed in their normal everyday lives that until they actually see an alien on TV, they're just not going to pay attention to it.
I agree. And I feel like that's probably by design, right? I believe that we are kind of force fed this idea of like materialism and how important it is to have all these nice things and how important it is to like follow your sports teams. It's crazy, right? Like
Absolutely.
most guys and some women too, like they could list off, every statistic of like their favorite football player, like through the whole season, because that's like, that's their focus. And that's kind of what a lot of people are kind of brought up to think like, oh, this is important. And I'm not saying it's not important, but I think there are other things in life that perhaps have a little bit more weight to it. And when people kind of remove themselves from what's force fed through our TVs and through our radios, you begin to kind of ask some bigger questions about like, why is half the world in poverty? Like, what is actually going on here? Like, why are things the way they are? And then you start to realize that, well, perhaps we're not quite being told everything. And then all of a sudden you're at the bottom of a rabbit hole.
I agree. I think all the time, like, how could people not be like? I talk to my mom or my wife or people who don't pay attention to this side. I'm like, how could you not be as interested in this as I am? Like, the government
Yeah.
has admitted UFOs are real, and nobody cares.
Yeah.
And I guess
Yeah.
that's like you said because they're so people are so wrapped up in their own lives that if it's not affecting their life directly, they'll talk about it at the dinner table maybe for 5 minutes if I bring it up,
Mm.
but other than that, they're just not paying much attention to it. So that definitely
Yeah.
makes sense.
It's very strange. It really is. Like, I don't know if it's, It's probably for different reasons for different people. Like there's obviously like still a stigma that is attached to it, and some people are perhaps like too afraid to, you know, like appear like a kook if they want to talk about it in front of their friends or whatever. Um, or I think even for some people, like just the idea or the to digest the concept that, you know, the government and the extended versions of it have been kind of lying to them for a long time, and that, you know, what does that mean for them? Like their, you know, is their whole, for them it might feel like their whole reality is a lie. So I feel like just the concept of the fact that it is actually real is going to be like, you know, people talk about the classic ontological shock. Like it's going to be a lot for people to digest who have been very closed-minded for a long time, because they're going to have to rip their mind open and accept what is happening right now.
Yep, exactly. And especially if there is a connection to religion, which if their
Yes.
UAP is real, which I think we've established they are, you know, there is absolutely a connection to religion because, God created the earth. And so what about things from other planets? Did God create them? Or is
Mm,
there a more direct aspect tied to religion? Perhaps is the God that we think of actually a UAP, or are angels actually UAPs, or demons? So the ontological shock aspect of it, I think, could be very real. And,
mm.
could also be a very big reason why the government is not leveling with people, because it would just rip the fabric of society apart.
Yeah, that's right. And I really, yeah, I'm totally under the impression, and I agree that there is a very strong tie to religion when it comes to the phenomenon. And this is obviously just my personal belief and based on what I've looked at over the years, that the phenomenon is what shaped religion. And, you know, you look back at some of the artwork that you see that's been depicted, and not just through like Christian artwork, but multiple, you know, there are things of these shining objects in the sky and all these people looking up to them. Like some of the artworks almost, it's like, how have people not asked this question before? Like it's been
Absolutely.
staring at us for hundreds of years in these beautiful paintings that have always been there, but for some reason we've just decided to go, oh, they're like, it's like the ignorance. It's almost ignorant, right? With that, there are literally painted pictures of people like almost worshipping an orb in the sky. And for some reason, people have been like, "Oh, it's probably just the sun. It's probably just,
Right, right.
you know what I mean? Like, is it, or actually, are they painting what thousands of people have also described since that point up until the modern day? Like, it's kind of hilarious, the arrogance of it.
Absolutely. It's like we have a built-in block in our brain to just to not
Yeah.
accept what's staring you right in the face. And it goes on from, like, even before religion, before there was Muslims, before there was Christians, back to almost post caveman days, kind of. But, once civilization was just starting, through the beginning of the Roman Empire, through Egypt and beyond, there's so many different reports and drawings and paintings of UAP that, it predated religion and it postdates religion. So it would make sense, I think, that there is definitely a religious aspect to it.
Absolutely. And, you know, religion and, you know, some kind of belief in something higher or spiritual has been the common belief and like the common understanding for, you could say, like all time, or at least most of what we can gather from recorded history up until, you know, recently, really. And then, like, all of a sudden, rather than, you know, appreciating each other and the world and respecting the earth, now we respect Love Island and, you know, all the bullshit that's on TV and our sports teams. Like,
Right.
there was some kind of strange shift that happened at some point where it became, you know, I don't know if trendy is the right word, but at some point, it just seems like society decided to throw uh, faith and belief in the bin and just kind of become like a bit of a self-serving society. And by the way, I'm not religious, at least in the sense of like I don't put myself under as a Christian or a Muslim or anything like that. I don't go to church. But I'll consider myself spiritual because I certainly believe in something, and I feel like I feel like I've felt that kind of connection, and this is just my personal belief. I don't think you need to go to church or you need to be a certain religion to have that connection. I think everybody can find it within themselves. Um, but I think perhaps a religion and a church is almost like, here's a well beaten path that we can help you walk down to find that. That's just my own personal sort of view on it, but I think everyone can kind of find that pathway themselves.
Yeah, I like that point. As a matter of fact, some of the worst people I know go to church. So, some great people I know go to church, some awful people I know go to church. So I don't think it's all about what's inside. So you can go to church and have that help you continue to be a good person, or you could just go and leave and continue being a shitbag. Um,
Yeah.
but throughout history, like, so even say flying saucers, there was one instance of a battle during the Roman Empire where not long after the battle, one of the people that was there, wrote a dialogue, whatever about the battle. He wrote about the battle in his diary. And after the battle, a big sun-like sub craft in the shape of a saucer appeared over the battlefield. So that's going back to the Roman Empire, and people are still
Mm.
seeing that today. I think people may have, like, to a large degree, shut off their thinking skills, their critical thinking skills, or philosophy skills, or to look back at history and tie it in today. And like you said, people are tied into Desperate Housewives, like my wife is addicted to, and all those shows, and that's what's going on. And there's just not a lot of looking back at the past and critical thinking skills happening today.
Yeah, I agree. And look, I'll say as well, like, there's nothing wrong with watching Love Island or Desperate Housewives or whatever you want to watch,
No,
right? Like,
absolutely.
everything is okay in moderation. But just like everything in life, I think the overconsumption of something can have a negative effect. And just like eating too much chocolate or too much shit food, I feel like consuming too much of that kind of content can be like junk food for your brain in a way, to like try and find a
I agree.
comparison.
Yep, I agree.
But yeah, it's okay to, like, we all want to relax sometimes. And, like I spend a lot of my time looking at UFOs and aliens and all that kind of shit. And it can become pretty like heavy and pretty deep. And sometimes I'm just like, man, I just want to put the soccer on. Like, I don't want to have to think. I just want to relax and enjoy something, because you can't just do the
Exactly.
same thing all the time.
Yeah,
But
it
it's about
consumes a lot of your time and a lot of your life. And
and energy.
sometimes I need to turn it off. Like, I need to spend time with my family, and I find myself in my
Yeah.
basement. That's where, like, my office is. I'm like, I need to
Yeah.
shut this stuff off and get back to real life for a little bit.
100%. And that's why I always usually sign off my shows by telling people to go and touch grass, because I
I
mean it.
love
Like, it
that.
is good to just get outside and just like go put your feet on the earth and just remember that, like, you're a human, you're surrounded by humans. Like, there is potentially a lot of craziness and weird things out there that we don't understand. But if you kind of lose yourself in that, that's when you go off the deep end.
Absolutely right. And I think there's something too. I go hiking a lot, like in the winter and the summer. I'm like
That's
a
great.
hiking nut. But, when I'm in the woods and I have solitude, there is nowhere else that I feel so connected to the world and to nature. And I think it's like almost like a primal part of ourselves, that's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be more connected with nature and the
Oh,
universe, and all the TV shows and the social media and the internet has really taken us away from the life that we're supposed to be living. And I think it also connects to the UAP aspect. And so I think it's all one thing, like the universe and humans and spirituality. It's all connected somehow. And I think that's why I and so many thousands, millions of others feel the same way when they're in nature, because it's taking you back to where you belong and what life is supposed to be.
yeah, I totally agree. And I think there's something to be said as well, like with many encounters that people have had with alleged non-human intelligence or UFOs in general, when people are getting these kind of information downloads or they're getting some kind of telepathic message, as they say, a lot of the time it's telling them things like technology is not good, like it's ruining you.
Right.
You need to connect back with nature. And again, I don't think that is saying go back and live in a cave. Like it's about moderation, right? Yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with having a house with electricity to it. It's a good thing, but being overly consumed in social media and your phone and reality TV and like I think that's where the detrimental effect comes in. And this is just my own little theory that I've thought about. But obviously, as we get older, it's kind of like a known thing that it feels like time speeds up, right? And I'm sure that is true. But I think that that social media and being connected to our phones and the internet is like perhaps creating like a false sense of making life feel like it's going even faster as we get older because there's just we're like our minds are going faster, I think, because we're constantly connected, we're checking notifications, we're like wondering what we're missing out on if we're not connected. And I feel like that stops us from just being in the moment, even in our own homes, like after work, right? If you think back to I'm at a good age where like I was just sort of old enough to remember life before the internet,
Yeah,
right?
me too. Exactly.
So, and when I think back to that, obviously I was younger, so it does feel like time goes a bit slower, but it was like your mind was going slower too, because when you were at home, you're just at home. Like I remember just kind of like walking around, kicking stuff around my bedroom with music on, and just kind of like you're not worried about who's doing what or whose notifications you're getting and who's posting on Instagram. You're just kind of in your own space and in your own head and just hanging out. And I feel like that doesn't happen anymore unless you intentionally like shut off all of your connections and just take that time to like meditate or actually just be in your own space. Everything is connected now. So you kind of and that's
Yep.
just normal, right? That's just the way life is. So I feel like because of that, we're just in this eternal yeah, you're wondering like who's messaging me, what am I missing out on, what podcast is coming out, who's got updates. It's and it just keeps us in this perpetual cycle of like quick, 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 quick.
Exactly. Like, oh, I just got off Instagram. Let me go on TikTok. Let me go on Facebook. Let me go
Yeah,
on YouTube. It's just a
yeah.
never-ending cycle. And I wonder if UAP was connected or NHI was connected in a spiritual sense. I wonder if I never really thought about this before, so bear with me. But I wonder if they're feeling like, say, UAP NHI is God. Let's just say
Hmm.
that they feel humans drifting away, and that's why their presence is becoming more and more known because like they're forgetting who they are, kind of deal. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for that. I think if we, which we are, like a young species, and I mean, I only say that off the basis of the fact that of the state of the world, right? We're clearly not at a point where we've got it all figured out, and we can just tell
Right.
by looking around at the state of things, right? So we're clearly still like in our infancy as a species. So I think if there were more highly intelligent species around us that were able to sort of come in and out, whether that's from planet to planet, dimension to dimension, or maybe they've always been here and they've been kind of observing from the sidelines somehow. If they were to notice, like, hey, these young guys are losing the plot, like they're nuking each other,
All
they're
right.
they can't stop fighting. They're making each other pick sides. You got to be left or you got to be right. Like it doesn't work that way. Life is not black or white. Life is not zero or one. Life is actually everything kind of in between those two. And they can't work that out, unfortunately. So maybe we need to step in and help them. Otherwise, they're going to destroy themselves, destroy where they live. And if you are to believe the fact that what is kind of the common understanding now that they've always been here, whatever it is, has always been here a lot longer than us, and is perhaps sort of socially engineered us throughout time. Um, that they are there to kind of like take care and intervene and be like, okay, you guys just need a little bit of mediation right now to get through what's going on in your world, and then once you get through to the other side, you'll be fine. That's the way I like to look at it, because it is kind of scary times, you could say. I mean,
Absolutely.
a lot of people, including myself, I've said it on my show a few times that we are kind of in the worst times right now. But that doesn't mean you have to have a negative outlook. I think it can get better, and I think it will get better. Um, but I think that comes from belief. I think that comes in humans collectively having a positive outlook and believing it. Because the moment you don't, the moment you're just pessimistic and you're like, okay, everything's ruined, like it's over, then it kind of is. So it's really like the power of our mind individually is powerful, but also collectively it's like, times infinity.
Yeah, I absolutely love that point, and I think there's a lot of merit to it. Um, so I have one other question for you. So, being that you're from Australia, is there any well-known case UFO cases in Australia that the rest of us might not know about?
You might not know about. Well, I mean, the most famous one is Westall, which is in Melbourne, which is in the state just next to mine, which I believe was 1966. I could be off by a couple of years there, but I'll go with 66, which was near a primary school, which is interesting because right, because it's similar to the one in Rua, Zimbabwe, which is only a couple of years earlier. So they basically a bunch of kids. I think this was a high school, to be fair, but still, for you that's like elementary and I think secondary school. That's kind
Okay.
of our equivalent. So a bunch of secondary school students, I believe, ran to like a field that was just like adjacent to the school's oval, and they ran over there because they could see these like objects in the sky that came down and sort of hovered just off the ground or landed, and they were there just kind of looking at them within, I don't know, 30 meters, or maybe for you that
Wow.
might be like 80 feet, something like
Yeah.
that, not too far. Um, and then they came up off the ground, turned on their side on the belly like we hear a lot of the times, and then just shot off like a bullet out of a gun. And it's interesting because this was, yeah, in the 60s, and a lot of those, well, I think all of those people are still alive today, and they've been on talk shows here in Australia recently, in the last 10 years, where I'm not sure why it came up again, but they were on these talk shows and they all stick to their story. They all swear to God they know what they saw. And for me, like that's the most compelling thing. That is like, when we talk about like Bob Lazar, Stephen Greer, like what is their credibility like? I mean, Greer, Lazar, you could maybe say there's like a few nuances with it, but what is compelling for me is when people stick to their story for 5, 10, 20, 50 years, like these people in the Westall incident. No one, I can't fathom how anybody would stick to a lie for that long when, like people say, oh, they're just doing it for fame, they're doing it for money. Like these people aren't making money, they're not getting famous. In
Right.
fact, it's the opposite. It's the opposite. They're getting ridiculed. People think they're a lunatic because of the stigma, but that's not changing their mind. They're telling their truth from the ages in the Westall case, from when they're 10, 12, 15, maybe, up until they're in their 60s now, and they're not budging. So to me, you have to consider the human aspect and the human element to it. Yes, what they're saying might be very unbelievable and hard to digest if you've never had that experience, but put yourselves in their shoes and what it would be like for 50, 60 years to be ridiculed. The decision to not waver from your story is the most compelling to me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You know the old saying, if two people know a secret, it's one too many. Because people
Yeah,
can't keep a secret. So if all these people were making it up, you mean to tell me at least a couple of them didn't come forward by now and say, oh, we were just playing a joke on everybody? But they
that's right.
haven't. And it's very, yeah. So even goes back to the Varginha case in Brazil, if people are familiar with that. That happened, I think, somewhat around the same time. I know at least a couple decades
Yeah,
ago,
it
or more
was.
than a couple. And even still to this day, people are continuing to stick to their story. They're saying, I know what I saw. I was there. They all drew similar things in different rooms.
Yes.
So there's a lot of substance there. And there's no compelling reason that kids at 10 or 15 or whatever the age would be would come up with a goofy lie and then continue to stick to it when they're 50, 60 years old. If it was
Exactly.
just a game kids are making up at recess, they would have said that. Ah, we're just, we're kids. But that's not what
Yeah, at least
happens.
after a couple of years. Yeah,
Right,
at least after a
exactly.
couple of years. Especially like when you get into the age of like being a teenager, right? You're almost, I feel like as a teenager, you're at that stage where like you look back at yourself as a kid and you're not quite old enough to grasp like, oh, I'm just a kid, just being silly. When you're a teenager, you're kind of like embarrassed of like, being a little kid, or little kids are embarrassing or whatever. So I feel like at that point, if anything, you would be like, yeah, look, we were just being stupid kids. But no, that's not what happened. It changed their life. And what's interesting as well is that in all of these cases that we've mentioned, actually in Westall and Virginia, at least, both cases have accounts from the witnesses that, after this was reported, there was United States Air Force and military there in Melbourne, Australia, and in Virginia, trying to get the details and suppress people from talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely right. There's just a lot of substance there, that these people are telling the truth. And we are good to go for a long meeting. So, and we're having a great conversation. It's so good that I just upgraded and we now have unlimited time for our meeting, so we don't need to worry about that.
We're good
Something I
to
should have
go.
known from the beginning, but I'm new at this. I'm learning as I go. So I appreciate everybody kind of
It.
bearing with us. And I'll get better each and every time I do this. And Josh, thank you for your patience. I appreciate it. I thought
That's all
I
good,
was
man.
already on the upgraded version, but apparently I had to go another step up. But we are now good to go to continue this great conversation. So, another question. So, almost keeping with a similar subject. Do you know, being that Australia is such a close ally of the United States, are you aware of any Australian programs that either studied UFOs in the past or presently? Kind of like a Project Blue Book of Australia.
Not specifically. I feel like Australia's involvement in this kind of stuff has either been fairly minimal or fairly kept under wraps. But interestingly, so on my channel, obviously a lot of my shows that I do are kind of just me kind of talking and digging into things. But I have set up a podcast sort of on the side that I've decided I'll do whenever I get the chance to have someone of like genuine interest on. It's not something that I'm going to try and like just knock out an episode every week or every month. It'll just kind of happen when it happens. So I've done one episode of that with
I
another
saw
Australian
that.
guy.
It was fantastic, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, he was really good. So his name's Reese Dalton Morgan, and his grandfather was a pilot in World War II, who then went on to work at a kind of what he terms as Australia's equivalent to Area 51. So it's called Woomera Test Range. And through his kind of research of his own grandfather, his grandfather passed away and never told him a word. And he kind of only found out after he read Ross Coulthard's book In Plain Sight, where Woomera Test Range was mentioned. But he realized he knew that his grandfather ran Woomera Test Range, but there was no mention of him because he was kind of one of the top dogs there. He was just kept out of everything, I guess. But through his research, he discovered that his grandfather there had a sighting of a UAP, like a circular disc shaped UAP that was hovering over one of their missile test launches. And within the same year, they also have found documented proof of, I guess you could say, an orb or a metallic sphere that was recovered by the test range. So
Oh,
apparently, some little girl had gone missing in the area. So they had helicopters up in the air doing a search. And that's where they discovered this metallic object and they brought it in.
wow.
And by the reports, so first of all, they thought maybe it was just some kind of scrap left over from these missile tests. But I mean, the engineers of the missile said that's not ours. We don't,
Right.
that's
They
none of
would
our
know.
parts. They would know. That's right. So they couldn't dent it, they couldn't scratch it, and they held like an oxy torch to it and were immediately able to put their hand on it so it wouldn't heat up, which is crazy. Like that's what I found to be one of the most interesting things. So yeah, there's this thing kind of like a bit bigger than a basketball that apparently when you see a piece of metal that big, you expect it to have a bit of weight to it. But apparently these guys could hold it out on one hand, like with an extended arm. So it was like abnormally light, couldn't dent, couldn't scratch, couldn't heat it up, couldn't crack it open. Um, so I think there's not too much info beyond that, but it's interesting, right? Because when we talk about like orbs in the sky, is that what we're seeing? These little circular metallic things that have these sort of unrecognizable properties. I mean, I can't confirm or deny that, but just kind of theory crafting, like perhaps that is like a fallen orb. Who knows?
Right, and it makes a lot of sense if they were trying to heat it up and it wouldn't heat up. So things coming in and out of planets, they could burn up coming through the atmosphere, and so they would
Yeah,
need to have that heat shield on them.
yeah,
So that is really, really interesting. And if the engineers didn't know what it was, that is saying a lot. And just a shout out to Ross Coulthart, a fellow Aussie, I believe, been doing
yes,
absolutely fantastic work. And he's been getting
yeah, he
all the
does.
scoops. He recently came out and he said he was aware of an FBI program that was investigating UFOs. And then just a couple days later, Politico comes out with an article confirming what Ross said a few days prior. So Ross has just been absolutely killing it. And just a quick shout out to him.
For sure. Yeah, he's doing great work.
He is. So, have you ever had an encounter?
I've had a few things, nothing overly definitive. Um, saw like so the first two were when I was a bit younger. One was just driving in a car and saw a blue, like electric blue light kind of shoot the opposite way that we were driving, like kind of like over our head on like a bit of an angle. Excuse me. And it was that quick that I sort of jolted forward in my car seat and when you pull forward too hard and the seatbelt kind of like catches you.
Yep.
It kind of did that. So I didn't actually get to look forward on the windscreen anymore. But as soon as it pulled me, I turned my head backwards to look out the rear window and it was gone. So it was like a bullet out of a gun, like super quick and like very bright blue. Again, not really conclusive, but interesting. Another one was probably maybe like 7 or 8 years ago at this point. Um, Back when I was doing sort of like, construction style work up early in the morning, driving out into the country. So really clear skies, looking out to the west, and there were lights in the sky that looked just like stars. A lot of people say when they see these lights in the sky or orbs that they're like close. For me, this one was, they looked like stars. Like they could have been just as close as the stars were. They did not look like they were near me at all. But I was looking at them and they looked like they were interacting with each other. Like they were, I think like the best way to put it is that they were like dancing or playing with each other. They would kind of like come in
Wow.
and then like come up and sort of like, just kind of like playing around with each other. And as a UFO person, we always look up at the sky. So
Absolutely.
when you actually see something, it's kind of am I actually seeing this or am I seeing this because I want to see this? So you start asking yourself questions. I kind of bumped the guy next to me who I was working with and I was like, dude, look at that. Like, can you see that? And he was just kind of like, oh yeah, like that's weird. Like again, going back to the people who struggle to digest this kind of stuff, it's almost like when they start to see something that breaks the mold of their reality, they're kind of just like, oh yeah, weird, huh. They're just like
Right. Like,
they
how
don't
do
want
you
to.
not think this is insane right now?
Yeah,
Like, why
yeah,
don't you
yeah.
care?
Yes, exactly. So that was that. And then yeah, I had a really strange experience just the other day, which which was very odd. So this was less than a week ago. Um, I took my dog out for a walk in the evening. Sun was setting, so you're starting to see like a few stars out. You're starting to get like that kind of visibility, but it was still light. And I was just throwing my ball, the tennis ball for my dog at the park, And given like what we've learned from Jake Barber recently and like the Skywatch, and I've got a bit of experience with like meditation, and I've done some of the gateway tapes and stuff like that. I just thought, like let's just give it a go. Like obviously since it had came out, I'd always thought, oh, I would like to try that one day. But I wasn't rushing out to go and try and summon UFOs. Anyway, so I was just sitting on this park bench and just kind of like closed my eyes, and I wasn't really meditating really. I was just kind of like focusing and just kind of thinking in my head, like kind of like, an open invite for if anything wanted to show itself, or any, just like an open invite really. And open my eyes, look up, nothing. And, that's cool, whatever. I wasn't really expecting anything. Threw the ball for my dog like another two times. So this is probably like less than 2 minutes later. And I just threw it and just like looked up again because we always look up. And there was an orangey white light, pretty much, I wouldn't, not directly above my head, but like just to my left. And compared to what I said before, this was notably closer. Now, I couldn't say you often hear people say that it's like a basketball or like a beach ball, like it looks kind of close enough to give that size. Again, I can't say how close it was, but it did look a lot closer than stars.
Okay.
Now, again, so I just sat down and, I'd created this intention. So when I looked up and saw that, the first thing that goes through my head is, is that a star? Am I imagining this because I want to see it? Like, what is this? But it was close enough that immediately I could see that it was moving. Okay. So it wasn't like it was there and I was like, well, what is that? What is that? Like straight away, I could see, oh my God, this thing is moving. And it kind of came from like just here to almost like in line with me. And then it started going to the east. And so for the first like few seconds where it got to here, I was just like going that little bit of shock, like going through my head, like have I just summoned a UFO? Like what is going on here? And then when it got to here, that's when I got my phone out and I started recording. And obviously, iPhones suck when it comes to this kind of recording. And I haven't posted, actually, I have posted it in the members only section of my Discord so far. I do intend to put it into a video. I've just been kind of thinking about how I want to do it because I've openly said in my videos that like in a way, no one cares about these little videos of like little dots in the sky anymore. Like they're that
Right.
common, and we've all seen it. Like it's nothing new, it's nothing exciting. So I think if I am going to make a video about it, I'm going to actually go to where it was. Like I'll take my GoPro and just kind of make it. I want to try and make it a bit interesting, maybe a bit more like show people the angles and like what was going on.
Yeah,
But
investigate
yeah,
it.
yeah, and I'm really glad though. So I filmed it for about a minute and a half as it traveled off to the east, and it was starting to get to the point where the video was like a minute and a half long, and it's not really that exciting. So I stopped recording and just tried to enjoy watching it for a little bit. And then I noticed it was getting like really, really far and kind of getting harder to see. So I pulled my phone out again and I filmed like another 20 seconds. And I'm glad I did that because I got the point where you kind of just see it all of a sudden vanish. Um, which really, I mean, from where I first saw it to where it vanished is like drastically different in the sky. And hopefully I can convey that when I make a video. But the fact that I actually got it disappearing on video, I think is really cool to actually have some kind of evidence that this is something anomalous. But yeah, I haven't tried to like go out and do it again since. It's not something that I mean, I
Wow.
will. I definitely will, but I'm not in a rush to go do it. I'm not, because at the end of the day, like as well, like we don't really know what we're playing with here. You know what I mean? I don't think it was bad. And I didn't feel any negative feelings at all. I can't say I felt any like overwhelmingly positive feelings like Jake Barber did either. It didn't feel like a spiritual experience. Um, and I'm open to the fact that it could have just been a coincidence as well. But the reason why I kind of am leaning to it not being is because, like we said, as UFO people, we literally look at the sky every single time we go outside, whether it's day, morning, or night. And I'm sure we would all agree that 99.9% of the time, you
Yeah.
don't see anything ever. So the fact that the first time that I sat there and kind of, focused a bit of intention and then saw something is what really like kind of stunned me for a second. I was like, oh my God, I'm actually seeing this. So yeah, that was that experience. And I'm looking forward to putting into a little bit of a video to kind of show people what went on there.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Go to the site where it happened, recount your day. I
Yeah.
think that would be really make for a really interesting video. And especially somebody like you completely come off as a very rational person, somebody with your head on right. And, so if you're going out and say you saw something, there's a pretty good chance you saw something. And just for
Oh yeah,
me,
I definitely saw it.
yeah, exactly. And you have it on video. So
Mm,
something happened. And like you said, we always go out and look up it, and 99.9% of the time, there's nothing there. So the one time there is something there, might be something you might want to pay attention to. And with the whole summoning the craft idea, a couple of years ago, I said those people were kooks. I didn't believe it. They're like the woo end of UFOs. Now my mind is slowly changing when people like Jake Barber, um, and other people are saying this is possible, along with the telepathy tapes, which was incredible.
yeah,
It's starting to lend some credence to this might actually be a real thing.
I agree. And I don't, you know, I'm, I feel like the things that are coming out right now are sort of connected, perhaps not in the way of like, this is all being controlled and we're intentionally being fed this stuff right now for a reason. And that might be the case. But I also kind of feel like the world just kind of adapts and evolves naturally as it needs to. And yeah, I feel like the telepathy tapes and the greater focus on like consciousness now and learning how to kind of get a better grip of your own mind and elevating your kind of perspective of the world is because that is what needs to happen right now. And I kind of attribute that sort of need to some of the success that I've had so far on YouTube, which is obviously, pretty limited. It's not like I'm a huge channel or anything, but the growth that I've had in a short amount of time, I think a lot of it is because we're sort of talking about the things that like the world, whether people realize it or not, is what they need right now. And that is like obviously like the UFO stuff is one thing, but a big part of my channel as well is trying to help people like realize and understand how division has kind of become this like subconscious element of our existence, and it's like almost just naturally accepted and is a part of the narrative that like you're either left or right, or it's zero or one or whatever. But life is actually much more complex than that. And that is kind of the message I want to put across, is that, or even like someone can be like have done a bad thing, but that doesn't make them a bad person. Like I think having like more empathy and understanding for people, just because someone perhaps doesn't agree with you or it isn't the same religion as you, that doesn't mean like you can't like share a good experience with them or you can't connect with them in another way. Like I think that these kind of ideas and concepts are vital to like people understanding these ideas right now is what is going to help us come out of the other side of these tough times that we're in right now. If we can't grasp this and we continue just being at each other's throats because you like Trump and I think he's a Nazi, like that bullshit will kill us.
Yeah,
And it is.
absolutely.
It is. And Trump's just one example, obviously. I use that because he's a very divisive figure, but it's just an example of the fact that we let these ideas and constructs separate us, and it's silly.
Yeah, I think you made a great point. The tribalism that is
Yes.
going on in the world is just it's getting a little out of control. And once trust in institutions, government institutions start failing, which it is big time, like it's a recipe for
Yep.
disaster. So maybe it ties into NHI, UAP, whatever you want to call it, coming and trying to bring us back to, there's a better way forward. It doesn't have to be this way. I can go out and watch a football game with somebody from another country or somebody that supports Trump. If we don't talk about Trump, and again, just as an example, we have a great time and watch a ball game, but then we have to label ourselves as red or blue or zero or one, like you said. And all of a sudden, just because of that one little thing, we're not friends and we're about to be at each other's throats. And now we have the weapons. If that mindset seeps into government, which it is, we have the weapons to destroy the planet now with that kind of
Mm,
stuff. We're not fighting with swords anymore. So that's
that's
just
right.
another reason for NHI to pay a little closer attention.
Yeah, I agree. It's strange, isn't it? Because you're right. You can meet someone for the first time and be like, "Oh, this guy's awesome!" Like, we're enjoying a game together or hanging out, having a good chat, and then all of a sudden politics come up, and it's like, "Oh, you're into like you're on that side," and it's weird. Like, it does kind of create this weird like emotional trigger that you're one of them, but like, yeah, life is just far more complex than that,
Exactly.
and
5 minutes before, we were laughing and having a great time, and all of a sudden, I painted a little red stripe on my head, and now we're
yeah,
enemies. It just shows how
that's right.
artificial it is and how like
Yeah,
constructed it is from the media and all, just what we're consuming.
that's right. And what's crazy is that like I think a lot of people would say, I think the left have a lot of great points and the right have a lot of great points, but you can't but they tell you you're either left or right. There is
Right.
no middle option. You have to pick a side. So even if you do think, yeah, they got some good points and so do they, it doesn't matter. They tell you you pick a side. So
Exactly.
they are dividing people. The people that we're putting our trust in and the people we're trusting to lead us are dividing us. It's ridiculous. Like it's actually like it's creating like a second like fall of man because we're now killing each other over these social constructs that we have created and the people that we've trusted to lead us are enforcing, and it's not working, or at least it's not working right now. And maybe we need to kind of elevate our consciousness, become more in touch with each other, become more empathetic and understanding, and realize that we can have differences. We are all different, but what is above all of that is the fact that we're human, we share this earth together, we should respect each other, and it's okay to have different opinions and to not be offended by someone else's opinion. I think that's a big thing too. Like in the last 10 or 15 years, there's this thing of like, if someone says something that you don't like or that you've deemed offensive, now they're like the bad guy.
Right.
Whereas I think we need to be teaching people that there are like billions, 7 billion or something people on the earth. That's a pretty high probability that some of them are going to say things that you don't agree with, and that's
That's
okay.
okay.
That's what we
Right.
need to. That's okay. It's all good. Like that, they're not going to hurt you. Their opinions aren't going to come in and like destroy your reality. It's all good. It's okay for people to disagree with you. It doesn't mean your views are less valid or worse or not true. Um, that's just the nature of reality. Everyone's different, and we need to just be okay with that.
Exactly. And, I'm sure if we sat down and talked, we'd find we agreed on 95% of the issues we're talking about. And then we let
Yeah,
5% that we might disagree on, divide the whole world and divide our countries and take us into a very dangerous place. So, to build off of that, you know, podcasts and UAP podcasts in general. So, what do you think? How do you think UAP podcasts are helping or hurting disclosure?
Um, I mean, I think they can only, well, I think if I had to label one or the other, I'd say they're definitely a positive thing. I think it's
Me too.
helping the the idea, get out to a larger audience. I actually just got a comment on one of my YouTube videos this morning saying like, thank you, and that they had never even been clued into this topic since before they found my videos. And now they're like converted, and now they're like down the rabbit hole, and they're so interested in what's actually going on, which is cool to me, because that is actually that is kind of the point of my podcast. I mean, I don't want to be just another like person talking about UFOs, because we do have a lot of them. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's great, because like I said, it's the more the merrier really in getting this message out. But if I was to really like niche down and tell you what my goal is with Polarity, it is to take all of this crazy shit that is going on, that's coming out from very reputable sources. You know, like we're not talking about like hippies out in the desert talking shit. Like we're talking about like the military and the government and the head of our space programs are telling us some really crazy things. And a lot of people who aren't interested in this topic, they have no idea. So my real aim is to kind of make this stuff digestible for them, and like appeal to them. So I mean, I do get pretty deep in my show and that, but I try to keep it like kind of a little bit lighthearted and fun at the same time. And I like to have a laugh, but try and bring that to the wider audience, like the people who don't know about UFOs. And I'm trying to like knock on their door and be like, hey guys, do you realize that the guy that was in charge of nuclear weapons is telling us he was abducted by a praying mantis? Like, do you realize what's going on here?
Right.
Whether,
It's a big deal.
whether that's true or not, it's a massive deal, because if it's true, it's obviously fucking insane. And if it's not true, then these people who are super high up in the government and the military have either lost their mind or are lying to us, which is also kind of scary. So whatever the answer is, it's kind of concerning. And a lot of people either don't know about it or they don't care.
Right. It's a big deal either way. If a guy that's in charge of our nuclear weapons is imagining a giant praying mantis abducted him, it's a huge
Yeah.
deal. If he got
Yeah.
abducted
Yeah.
by a giant praying mantis, it's a huge deal. And I love what you say on the bio in your channel. That I think don't I'm not quoting, but it was something like, "I want to be your guide into the world of
Yes.
UAP." I'm not the be all end all, but let me be your guide, and I'll take you through what's going on in the world of UFOs. And I really like the way you phrase that, and it tells people, you're safe. You're somebody they can turn to and find out what's going on with things they may not understand yet.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't, like I said, I don't profess to be like, because the idea was that like the guide or the guru, I don't want to come across or pretend like I'm a guru, because I mean no one is really a guru on this topic,
Right.
because
We're
it's
all
all
speculating.
speculation, it's all conjecture, it's all just trying to connect the dots and put the pieces together. But I have been doing that for the best part of 20 years. So I can just give you that much time worth of experience and connected dots that I will try and convey to people who are new to this. But yeah, I definitely don't profess to have the answers, because I don't have the proof. And that's why I find it funny when like I get comments, not just on my stuff, on I think everyone gets these kind of comments of people being like, they come in and they're already angry before they've started commenting. They're like, "Oh, it's all bullshit. Like, I can't believe you believe this." Like, people are like mad that people believe it, and I'm always just, or people say like, "You don't know what goes on behind closed doors," and I try not to reply to like the negative comments too much, but
Right.
sometimes I can't help myself, and I'll just say things like, "Yeah, you're right. Like, I don't know what's going on behind closed doors, but you're obviously quite confident in your position to be coming on here and telling everyone they don't know. So could you please tell us what's going on? Because I'm assuming you know by how confident you are." And they never write back and tell you what's actually going on. But
Thanks, of
it's
course.
interesting how 'cause, like, the difference is I know that I don't know what's going on, and I'm open to being wrong, and I'm interested in speculating, whereas they also don't know what's going on, but they're so confident that they're right. But they don't know. They don't know any more than we do. But
Exactly.
they ain't like they are not budging. But I think being curious and being open-minded to the potential is the best place to be, because I think it's becoming quite clear, especially as we discover like quantum mechanics and quantum physics and stuff like that, that the reality is very different than we understand. And really, to assume that we all happen to be living at like the time where we've discovered everything. Do you know what I mean? Like to think that we have got everything worked out and that we already know everything there is to know, while half the world is in poverty, while we're throwing nuclear weapons at each other, like to consider the state the world is in and then be like, oh yeah, we've got it all worked out.
Right.
We've figured it all out. It's all good. Like, wake up to yourself. Like, look around. We clearly are struggling to work out what is going on. And quantum mechanics and quantum physics are really showing us that like the nature of reality is far more complex than zero or one.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's made some really, really good points. I spend a lot of time on UFO Twitter,
Hmm.
which you can find me on UFO Twitter at the UAP Reporting Center on Twitter. Go over and check me out. I provide near daily updates on what's happening in UAP world. But I've seen how the toxicity in the culture, in everyday life, and politics has seeped its way into UFO world. Like you're either pro Lou Elizondo or anti Lou Elizondo. You're either pro Jeremy Corbell or you're anti Jeremy Corbell. Like, guys, we don't have to pick teams. We can listen to what
Yes.
everybody's saying, digest it. You may believe that person on this and you may doubt this, but don't discount information just because it's coming from somebody on the other team. UFO
It's
Twitter has become
ridiculous.
so toxic and divisive and self-defeating. Like, whether we like Lou Elizondo, whether we don't like Lou Elizondo, and I'm just using him as an example. It could be Joe Schmo that I'm talking about. But we all want the same thing. We all want to find out the truth. We all want to find out what's going on. We should all be working towards the same goal and not tearing each other down every chance we get. And same thing goes for commenters on YouTube and another seriously toxic place.
Mate, I couldn't agree more. I feel like X is probably the worst place when it comes to it. And I feel like a lot of that comes from free speech, right? Which I'm a massive advocate for, by the way. I don't think censoring people is the answer to free speech. I think education is the answer to free speech. And first of all, like telling people that like everything you see online, especially with AI, don't just take it for truth. Like because you can't these days. If you take everything you see online for absolute truth, you're a fool, because
Yep.
there's just so much out there that can trick you. But when it comes to, yeah, the whole divisive nature of the topic, it is a shame because everyone does want the same thing. And it's like what we were talking about earlier with politics. It's like this tribalism nature of like people feel this like need to pick a side. But picking a side when we don't have the whole picture is silly, because there's a good chance you could pick the wrong side. And, there's nothing wrong with that if you do, but there's also nothing wrong with just sitting back and saying, like, okay, that's some interesting information over there. Oh, here's what this guy's saying is a little bit different. It's also interesting, though, I guess, given the fact that we have two conflicting people, and given the fact that I'm just a random guy on Twitter, I don't have clearances. I'm not in the
Right.
Pentagon. I don't know shit. So maybe I should just sit back and soak it up and, reserve my judgment until the end, because screeching that, he's a grifter and he's a liar or whatever, all that does is it just contributes to muddying the disclosure message, and it
Right.
creates conflict, it creates division, and it kind of derails the whole process. I mean, when you have these big figures like Jeremy Corbell, Elizondo, Greer, they're all kind of attacking it from different angles. They've all got slightly different stories or whatever. That's already enough division by its nature, right? We don't need people like picking sides and going for picking people like it's a sports team, because it's not a sports team. This is an issue that is above politics, above everything. If what we're being led to believe is true, or even just half of it, it's going to be the biggest revelation of our time. It's going to be above everything. So, you know, treating it like it's a baseball game and that you're rooting for your team is just like it's primitive. We're behaving like apes.
Yeah. Well said. I couldn't agree more. And again, people aren't using their critical thinking skills. Just
Yeah.
take a step back. You don't have to jump on the internet every chance you get and be hateful to people and try to tear other people down. That shouldn't be human nature. Sadly, I think it's becoming human nature. We're full of so many faults of, I think jealousy plays a big part of it. You know more than I do, and you're making a name for yourself, and I'm not. So, they might not even admit that to themselves that that's the reason they're doing it. But I think jealousy plays a huge part in it, and ego. And just like everything with man, like greed and gluttony and ego and pride, and it's almost humanity's downfall. And just causes
Yeah,
us to
they're
be at
low
our
vibrational
throats.
states.
Yeah, exactly. We're at each other's throats for trivial stuff, and it's now seeped into UFO world, and I just think it's a shame. I think there's a lot of people doing fantastic work on here. We don't have to agree with everything those people say. Just take the information in and see what everybody's saying. Try to connect the dots. Maybe what this person said, okay, that confirms what this person over here said, and you can kind of construct a story that might make sense to you if you would just take the time, listen to what everybody's saying, and give people the benefit of the doubt until they prove otherwise. Trust but verify. And the only thing I know for a fact, and I say this all the time, the only thing I'm sure of about UFOs is that I'm not sure of anything. So more people
Right.
should have that mindset because none of us know, unless we have a security clearance and we've been in government and seen stuff, none of us have any idea. So let's just be honest that none of us have any clue, and we're all trying to find the truth. It's a
Yeah,
shame
I
that it's
totally
not
agree.
that way.
I
So,
agree.
question: what do your friends and family think of you having a UFO podcast? Do they think you're the crazy UFO guy, or
That's an interesting one. It was certainly like something that I was a little bit self-conscious about, at the start when I was working a job, I was just kind of like putting out one episode a week on YouTube. I wasn't really cutting that up into reels and putting it out on social media or anything. It was just kind of something I was doing TikToks as well, but I never really told anyone about it. Not because I was embarrassed or anything like that, but it was kind of if anyone asked me, I'd be like, "Oh yeah, I'm doing this thing," but I just didn't feel the need to go and do that. I wanted to kind of the way I thought about it was if I'm good at this and it's worth telling someone about, then they'll probably find out organically. Like
right?
and that did start to happen. Like people that I knew would message me and be like, "Oh, you just popped up on my TikTok feed." So it did kind of start to happen organically. Then when I lost my job in early December and I decided to just like put all my energy into this, that's when I was just like, well, look, if I'm going to do this thing, I can't be worried about what people think about me. I can't be worried. Like, I can't care what people think. Like, if I'm going to do this, I've got to just do it. And that's when I started like cutting up all my reels and just slamming them all over my socials. And then, yeah, I started to get messages from like some of my family members. And then obviously at Christmas time, you see all the family and, people are like, oh, you're doing YouTube now and like all that kind of stuff. And which was funny. And yeah, like definitely different family members and even friends as well talk to you more about like, even like, you've got some friends that I would have maybe considered like close friends. They'd certainly know what I'm doing. They've never said a word to me about it, which is cool. Like, I'm not upset about that, but it kind of just shows that maybe like to them it's a bit like weird or whatever. And then I've got other friends who perhaps I didn't talk to as much, but they've like reached out to me like, hey man, like I love what you're doing. Like it's awesome. Good on you. So that's really nice as well. When it comes to family, no, nobody thinks, um, well, at least they haven't told me to my face that they think
Right.
that I'm a
Well,
weirdo. But
your girlfriend hasn't left you yet, so that's a good thing.
no, no, she hasn't. She's like my biggest supporter, really. And
That's
to be
great.
honest, like I said at the start, there was like a lot of self doubt, not just from the fact of like what I'm talking about in public, but just self-doubt in myself, like putting myself out there. People are going to think, I sound stupid, or I'm shit at it. Like, all the normal things. And the things that I still kind of get, we all get it sometimes. But she really was like, no, like, you're great. Like, do it, do it, do it. All the things that you want your partner to say. So yeah, I feel like she was definitely a big push to actually go ahead and do it. And yeah, I think some of my family members have actually gotten more invested and interested in this topic because of it, um, which is really cool.
That's the
And I
goal.
think, yeah, that's right. And I think, I do try to remain objective, and I don't put all of this information across like it is absolute truth. I put it across because it's interesting, and I say that, like, we're talking about this because it's interesting. No one can prove it, but there are credible people saying it. So it's worth looking at. And I think any reasonable person, when they hear that and be like, oh, it's not just Josh saying he's being abducted by a praying mantis. It's the guy who is in charge of nuclear weapons. Like, hang on,
Right.
like, what is, what I mean? Like, any reasonable person who starts to see who is actually saying this stuff is gonna, whether they want to dive into it so deeply or not, they're at least going to be like, okay, Josh isn't crazy. He's just reporting on some crazy things, and that's what he's
Right.
interested in. So I think that's kind of how people see it, whether they're too involved or not. I don't think they see me as like the weirdo. They kind of see, they might think my interests are a bit like out there, but it's not like me personally,
Yeah,
which is nice.
I completely get it. Like I don't share any of my stuff on my personal social medias, just for a lot of the same reasons. Like one, I don't think I'm good enough yet. I'm still practicing, and it's just I don't know what it is, but yeah, like I want to keep those two worlds separate. So it takes
Yeah.
courage, like you did, to start sharing them across your socials and doing all that. So I give you a lot of props because I'm not there quite yet. So I definitely give you props for doing that. And that is the goal. I think that we're all doing this for is to try to get more people to take this subject seriously because it is a serious subject. When there's a guy, that's in charge of nuclear weapons saying this. Lou Elizondo, who is
Yeah.
a top level counterintelligence officer in the military for so many years, and David Grush and David Fravor, who was a top tier, fighter pilot for the F-18 Hornets. These are a lot of serious people. And if they're taking the subject seriously, why shouldn't I be taking the subject seriously? So that's the
Yeah.
message I think we're trying to get out. And the more people you can bring into it, like starting with your friends and family and then expanding from there. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, exactly. And people could say like, oh, the military and the government are the people who have been covering this up for so many years, like, and now you want to listen to them, and I totally respect that, and I to a degree I kind of get that, like that's a valid skepticism to have, but at the end of the day, they're still saying it, whether it's disinformation and it's all just a Project Bluebeam lie to you know
Right.
control us even further, then we should still be paying attention to that with a skeptical mindset of like, hey, what's going on here? Are we being lured into a trap, or is it true? Like either way, whatever the reason is for these people to be saying it, it's absolutely worth paying attention to.
Yeah, I agree. And, people have to say when they say the government is not just like one single entity. There is
No.
thousands upon thousands upon thousands, like a lowly fighter pilot. He's not part of the big government conspiracy to keep UFOs secret and all that. So,
That's
you
right.
gotta be objective, and, use your
Yep.
critical thinking skills to say maybe a little skepticism, like, is healthy towards anything, but I don't think this fighter pilot, multiple fighter pilots, would just be making up stories as part of some government conspiracy. I think there's a few gatekeepers that are like running the programs to keep this stuff secret, but I think almost everybody else is outside those rooms, and are trying to
Yeah.
fight for the truth.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
And now I got an interesting one for you. So, do you think UAP could be linked to cryptids like Bigfoot or Mothman or stuff like that? You think there's any link there, or you think they're two completely separate things?
Well, I think if cryptids are to be believed, which that's sort of like an area that I've never really gone too deep into. The only thing I really know a little bit about would be Bigfoot. And I feel like if that stuff is real, then it probably has some kind of aspect of like not necessarily UFOs, but the phenomenon tied to it, whether that be like
Yeah,
these things are like interdimensional.
exactly. That's what I
Because
think.
I find it very hard to believe that there is a giant ape species in that hangs around in the wilderness that is so elusive and rare that we can't even get a photo of it. Like if it's a giant ape, I feel like somehow we would have much better evidence by now. So if it is a giant ape and it is real, then I feel like there's probably some kind of like interdimensional aspect to it where it can like phase in and out of what we can perceive. That's the only way I can really see that being a thing.
Yeah, I completely agree. I do think there's some merit just because so many people have reported it, and law enforcement people, military people, regular citizens
Mm.
that have no interest. So I am a somewhat of a believer. I still retain a little, being skeptical. But I do agree with the interdimensional thing. I think that's the only thing that really makes sense between Dogman and Mothman, and Bigfoot and all those things. I think they must be coming from a different dimension if they're real. I actually read, I don't know if you're familiar with John Keel, but he
No.
investigated Mothman. I highly recommend, he's an author, checking out his book. So after the Mothman sightings in West Virginia, decades ago, he actually moved to the town and investigated it. And there was, I think, hundreds of UFO sightings right around the same time. And he thought there was a connection. I think there's a connection. There's a museum in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, that you see a video, and it documents the whole case. There was men in black that were 100% in the town, documented by journalists after the sightings, after the bridge collapse. So if anybody's not familiar with the Mothman sightings in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, highly recommend checking it out, and I highly recommend checking out John Keel. Very interesting stuff, but I just thought it was interesting to touch on. There's a lot of people that are into the cryptid subject.
Mm.
It's a fun thing to talk about.
Look, if I was going to give you a little theory of mine, this is just kind of speculating. If if there are, as we're being told, hundreds or even thousands of other species out there, and the basic ones that we kind of get well, we've got us, right? We are allegedly some kind of genetic evolution uh, from like an ape species, and then we hear about reptilians, right, who are allegedly a humanoid evolution and advanced development from like a reptile species, like a crocodile, dinosaur, lizard, whatever you want to call it. Then like or praying mantises, right? And so you've got this highly evolved species that comes from a mantis that we have here on Earth, just like we have crocodiles and lizards and monkeys. So if these are things that to be believed, I don't think it's
Well, that's interesting.
much further of a step to say like, well, maybe there's a species that has been genetically developed and advanced from moths or from dogs or from gorillas or from cats. You see like these depictions of Egyptian gods with like cat heads and stuff, or like maybe that is real and like just as real as everything else. Like I don't think it's that much of a stretch to think that there could be genetically evolved versions of almost every form of life.
That's
But
fascinating.
yeah,
That's really fascinating. I never really thought about that, but it would make sense because I have thought about, there being civilizations that are a lot older than us that we just have no idea about because they were millions of years or hundreds or billions of years ago, whatever. But they were so advanced that they already left the planet doing whatever they're doing, and then they come back, to
yeah,
visit for whatever reason. And they are just, I never thought about them though, coming from Earth and kind of developing just like we have. Like we're humans, we came from a monkey. maybe they're mantises who came from a mantis, or reptilians came from a
Yeah.
lizard, and just millions of years before us. That's actually pretty interesting to think about.
Yeah, like it could just be because you hear a lot of people say Earth is a petri dish, right? So it's kind of like this little incubator for life to kind of develop and evolve. Well, it's like, well, maybe this is just our turn, and before us, the mantises had
Exactly.
their turn, and the lizards had their turn, and everyone had their turn, and now this is our turn, and that could perhaps be why like the focus is to become like this evolved interplanetary species, so we can get off of this planet and let I don't know the elephants have a turn or whoever's next
Right,
to,
all right. Whoever's next
you know
on
what
the
I
list.
mean? Yeah, that's right.
Right, exactly. Maybe they already cracked how to travel between dimensions, or how to
Yeah.
travel, faster than the speed of light, and all that. And that's pretty
Mm.
interesting to think about. And, for people that are interested in cryptids, that might be, if you've not heard of that theory before, which I didn't, it might be interesting to look into, because I do, like I said before, I do think there's some credence to it, because there's so many sightings of cryptids, that it
Yeah.
can't all just be crazy people making stuff up, like law
That's
enforcement
right.
people, military people, government people. They can't all just be making it up, and for shits and giggles, and then sticking to the story, like the same thing we were talking about with the UAP sightings earlier, and the schoolyards, and other
Yes.
instances. After 20 years, like, all right, I was just messing with you guys. But, that
Yeah.
hasn't happened. So that's pretty cool theory to think about. So were there any movies or books or documentaries that you saw on the subject that really piqued your interest, that got you into this stuff?
Well, the one thing that got me into it, like the definitive moment for me, was about I don't know the exact age, but I would have been about between 13 and 15 years old. And watching either Discovery or the National Geographic Channel, one of those documentary channels, and there was a documentary on the Phoenix Lights. I'd never heard of it before. And after watching that, I was just captivated. And when I realized, so this would have been around the mid 2000s, between 2005 and 2010, I reckon, somewhere around there. And I couldn't believe after watching it that I was like, wait, this happened over 10, 15 years ago, and nothing's come of this. Like no one cares. Like what do you mean? I just watched a video of thousands of people saying they all saw a triangle the size of three football fields fly silently over their city. Thousands of people are saying it on the same night, all at once. Did they all? This is before the internet was really mainstream. Did they all just secretly meet up at the town hall and decide they're going to plan this? Like, obviously not. Like, this doesn't happen. They obviously all saw something extraordinary in the sky, and no one cares, apparently. And I just couldn't wrap my head around that. And to me, like from that moment on, it was like, well, this is like, I don't care that nothing's happened and that people aren't interested in this. I know, I can just feel like there's obviously something to this, obviously. So that was kind of the thing that got me into it. And then years went by, and I'd try and check out documentaries. This is kind of in the I'm probably a young mid teenager, so my internet access at that point is sort of limited. I was always, even at that age, I was a big Blink 182 fan. Like I've that's kind of been like my I've got a Blink 182 tattoo. Like that's one of my favorite bands. And obviously they had a song that came out in I think 2000, Good Aliens Exist. So when I found out that even like my favorite band was like, oh yeah, even they know aliens exist. So I was like, that even kind of pulled me in even further. Obviously I was a big Tom DeLonge fan as a teenager as well.
Right.
And so what took me to the next level was in 2013, I came across an article which had the video of one of Phil Schneider's talks. I don't know if you know Phil Schneider.
See the
Um,
Dolce guy?
yes. Yep.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
So he's got quite a few speeches, and I'm planning to sort of do something with him and make a little video because it's so interesting. But
Yeah.
he, in like the mid '90s, was talking about how so he was a geologist, I'm pretty sure. So his job was kind of basically building, like burrowing out these spaces underground for the deep underground military bases to be built. So he was responsible for like, using whatever tools they have to dig it out. And he was deep down in an area that was expected to just be, blow land away and clear the space. And they kind of blew open an entrance to, I'd have to double check because I'm not 100% clear. He blew open an entrance to what was either like a pre-existing, like above top secret type of military base that had non-human intelligence in there working or doing stuff, or he blew open like just a straight up a non-human intelligence cavern that was like not related to the military. I can't actually remember which one it was, but I mean they're both kind of crazy either way.
Right.
But what ensued from that point was like a firefight. So he said 66 people, I think, that he was with died, like Green Berets, like high level soldiers, and that he was like shot in the chest with something, and that while what was super compelling to me is that while he was giving this speech, he holds up his hand and like these fingers are completely gone, and they've just like these little stubs, and it looks like they've been almost like melted away. Um, and he said that was like an injury from the encounter. So he then has gone on to talk about how he's had threats on his life for speaking, but he doesn't care because the people need to know the truth, and that, he's not suicidal and all this kind of stuff. And then before the turn of that decade, he was found strangled with his own catheter.
Right.
And, obviously that was deemed as a suicide. So when I viewed this video, I saw everything he was saying. I saw him saying that. And then at the end of the article, I read that he was found dead. And so to me, that took me to like a whole new level. I was just like, whoa.
That'll get you
Because
down the rabbit hole.
yeah, because I believe this guy. Because again, I just can't get past the fact that these people aren't getting fame, money, or attention by doing this. They're actually getting the complete opposite. They're getting their life ruined. They're getting targeted. They're making that like they can't get jobs. They're
Right.
struggling financially. Their credibility gets put in the bin. But as they're saying, they don't care because they know the people deserve to know the truth. And to me, like, yes, it's if you struggle to believe this stuff, it's very easy to just use the whole like, oh, he's just a lunatic, because that helps you protect your mold of reality without anything
Yep.
disturbing it. But if you really consider the human aspect of what is going on here, what this man is saying, what he's faced, and what happened to him, I think, it's staring you in the face of what is actually going on here. So that really pulled me to a new level. And that's when I would say I got like real deep into it. So that was in 2013. And I would say from then up until the last couple of years, it would come and go, like I'd be deep into it for say 6 months, and then I'd maybe, just kind of lose track for a little bit because, up until the whole like To the Stars Academy thing came out, it was very like, you'd hear a bit and then you'd hear nothing for months, and it was very sporadic. But then obviously Tom DeLong came out, who, I've been a lifelong fan of, liking Blink 182. So then I was just like, holy shit, my favorite musician is telling the world aliens are real. Like this is
Right.
everything I've ever wanted. Like couldn't be
Tom
cooler.
DeLonge is on Rogan talking about aliens. Hell yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's when again that probably took me even to another level because now I'm like actively invested like day to day. Like who are these new guys? Lou Elizondo, Jim Semivan, like who are these people? And you're sort of meeting a whole new crew and a whole new thing. Um, so yeah, there's been a few things along the road that have taken me to kind of different parts. And I think now looking back at the whole Tom DeLong thing, I do wonder, and I have always kind of wondered. I think in the when it came out, the excitement was just so big that I probably didn't think quite critically at the time. But now I definitely am open to the idea that he was potentially used as a asset to spread a specific narrative. And I feel like he would have been an easy target for that because, obviously I don't know him personally, but having watched Tom DeLonge through the years prior to that, I know how passionate and how deep his interest was in UFOs. And I just know that if someone from in the government offered him a branch of like, oh, you can be the guy to come with us and tell the story. I mean, I'm sure he's a critical thinker too, but I feel like that opportunity just would have been like a whirlwind. It would have been so overwhelming that it would have been very easy for him to have been caught up in, a controlled narrative, which is probably what the case. Doesn't necessarily mean the narrative is true or false, but I think that's
Right.
just a point that as much as I love Tom DeLonge, I think that's probably something that needs to be kept in the awareness and in the scope when you look at what's coming out through all of that.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of people are not using is their critical thinking skills, which you clearly are. So, I mean, yeah, I love Tom DeLonge. I think he's done great work, but there also might be a little of that. Maybe he's got taken in by the government, or maybe he was given disinformation, or But I want to touch
Mm.
back on the Phil Schneider case because I think that one is absolutely fascinating. I saw a couple documentaries on him as well, and his death it was almost impossible for him to have killed himself in that way with that catheter. And anybody they
Yeah.
spoke to, friends, family, he was not suicidal. And just the way he died was really, really fishy. And they were very fast to rule it a suicide. And there's been so many cases from Dolce. As a matter of fact, the biggest cattle mutilation in history was in none other than Dolce, New Mexico. Is that because there's aliens living under the ground? I think that would make sense to me, right? If that's where the biggest cattle mutilation took place, which is beyond any doubt that the cattle mutilation happened. That is a real thing investigated by
Mm.
the law enforcement. So to me, one and one makes two. Where there's smoke, there's fire, and I think there is definitely merit to what Phil Schneider had to say. And so I like that you brought that up. He's definitely an interesting case. And if what he claimed were actually to ever be proved true, that would blow the lid off the entire subject. That there was a firefight in
Yeah.
an underground military or alien base under the ground in New Mexico where we lost dozens of soldiers. I mean, that if that didn't blow the lid off the whole UFO subject, I don't think anything would.
That's right. And, it's not even just that either. Like he speaks about the alien human treaty, like an agreement between non-human intelligence and the government. And, you know, that's exactly what John Blitch said that he believes and that he was told by Sergeant Major Robert Dean. So, it's like if you're to believe someone, can you really cherry pick what you believe from them? Like if he's saying it's true and that's backed up by what he's saying, and then what he's saying is backed up by him, then you kind of have to listen to everything everyone is saying in that
Right.
chain. It's not really fair to cherry pick. Or at least, I mean, there could be elements of disinformation because that is a thing, but I don't think it's like we don't have enough information to cherry pick what we want as to be as truth. Like if you're going to um, really seriously listen to these people, you kind of have to listen to everything they have to say.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And there are so many serious people saying it, like those people you just mentioned, and then going all the way back to Roswell with Colonel Corso and the general that was above him, and and
Hmm.
then it ties into Barry Goldwater calling the general. So at Roswell, after the crash happened, the material and bodies were said to have been transported to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. So a little while later, Barry Goldwater calls he has a friend that's a general who was like the base commander or whatever at Wright-Patterson. He calls him and says, "Hey, I've heard you've got alien bodies and alien debris from the crash at Hangar 18 at Wright-Patterson. Could I come and see it?" General told them, and they were friends. Um, don't ever ask me that again. Don't ever bring the subject up to me again. And we never had this conversation. So if there was no there, why would that have been the general's response? Why wouldn't the general have said, "Hey, you're crazy. That never happened. We don't have anything like that." And yeah, come see. It's an empty hangar. So
That's, I mean, the whole like um, hesitancy to even say a blatant no that there's nothing there is just an answer in itself.
exactly. If they're not denying it, That's basically them admitting it. And if there
Yeah,
is no
that's right.
there, why wouldn't they just say, we have nothing? Come and look all you want. Why is there a need for
Yeah, exactly.
skiffs? Why is there a need for this stuff to be classified? If it's all just man made stuff, why not let people see? Why not let the congressman say, here, you come, we're not, can't tell the public because this is sensitive military tech. But okay, you guys have Congress, you guys have congressional clearances. Come and see, and you'll see that there's nothing nefarious or nothing abnormal about
Yeah.
this stuff. But that's not what happened. So it's just a long line of evidence that from 1947 to now, and then you talk about the government treaty. There's the treaty with that. It supposedly started with President Eisenhower, which then led to Majestic 12, and so it's just a long line of conspiracy that's still continuing and hopefully is going to end soon.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, we'll see. I think we're on the road there. We're getting closer. So, and this kind of piggybacks off what you were just talking about, Tom DeLong. Do you think the government is deliberately planting information in the UFO community? And do you think they might be using whistleblowers to kind of mislead people? And I know you just talked about that, but maybe you could expand on that.
Mm. I mean, I don't necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily say I think they are doing that, but I definitely think it's a realistic possibility. I certainly think going back to what we were talking about earlier with X and like Twitter, that there are absolutely disinformation, or at least not disinformation accounts, but like accounts that are bots that are programmed to like attack and abuse and tear down people, either certain people or people spreading certain messages or ideas. And whether they're like actual robots or they're people, real people who have like been brainwashed. Like, and I don't mean brainwashed as in like a zombie at their computer doing it, but like through social engineering, they are so full of like hate and anger that they just spend their day on Twitter having a go at people. Like,
Right.
I mean, you must spend more time on Twitter than me because you've got quite a following on there. I like Twitter. It's a fantastic place for up to date news. Like when I'm trying to gather stuff together for a show, I usually source it from there because it's just a great place for that.
Oh
But
yeah.
you're just sifting through like the most negative idiots of all time when you're trying to find
It's
science
horrendous.
information. It is. It's terrible. So yes, I do think there's definitely accounts out there that are designed to muddy the waters. Whether like the people that are out in the space are doing that, yeah, I'm not really sure. I think it's something that we should be open to considering. But again, it just goes back to what we said at the start. We don't know for sure. So, unless it became blindingly obvious that something was up, then I think it's just too early to start finger pointing and labeling people as certain things. But
Yeah.
what I will say is that my approach to X and Twitter now, and kind of social media in general, is if your account doesn't have like a real photo of you or what looks like an authentic photo of a person with a real person's name. Now, obviously, you could find a fake photo and use a fake name. I understand that. But my approach is if your account doesn't have a blue tick and you don't have a real photo and a real name and something that is like authentic in your bio, I just don't listen. I don't care what you have to say because to me, you're like I just assume that you're probably just a bot. You
Right.
because you will find that the most negative, hateful, aggressive people on there have like anime girls as their display picture and like some
Yes.
stupid name. So it's like, why would I take you seriously? Like, why would I stoop to your level and ingest what you're putting out and like really consider that when you're just spewing the most like negative, unconstructive crap and you can't even be bothered to like show your face. Like if you're not going to
Right.
show your face with what you're saying, at least on such a heavy topic that is like serious, I'm not going to listen, not going to take in seriously what you're saying. Like you're probably just a bot. So I feel like that approach is like a way to kind of protect my own energy and my own health to just like
Your own
that's how I navigate
sanity.
it now. Yeah, if you're not going to put your face out there and like show up respectfully, then I just literally just assume you're a bot.
Right. I agree with that for sure. If you're not coming from an intellectually honest, we may disagree, but if you're coming from an honest place intellectually, I'll hear you out and talk to you and debate, whatever. But if you're just coming at me with
100%.
vitriol for because I put Jeremy Corbell in a post, then I got no time for that, and I got
100%.
more important stuff to do. Um,
Exactly.
I do have a good one for you. So, if you had a guess, do you think UAP might be benevolent or malevolent? Now, there's people like, oh my God, the Bledsoes, who think these things are God and they're holy and they're nothing but pure good. And then you have people like Lou Elizondo who say, these things may not have good intentions for humans. Um, so there's two kind of competing trains of thought. If you had a guess, what do you think they are?
I think there's
Or not?
both.
Yeah, I agree.
I think I think there's both. I think it's clear that many people have said Paul Hellyer, ex-Minister of Defense of Canada, said over 10 years ago that there are multiple species here visiting the Earth. Okay, this is someone very high up in the government, within the defense departments. Like again, these people in very high positions are telling us this stuff. So I think it's not again another fast step to assume that all these different species have different agendas, different desires, different objectives. And we so to then to pull it back to religion again, I'm not pushing any particular faith here. I consider myself more of just like a spiritual person. I think the concept of good and evil is real, and I think again, this is my own speculation. I think that concept of good and evil probably and very likely comes from two either warring or just two presences that are here on Earth that are able to manipulate us in each way. And I feel like wherever you decide to focus your intention, whether that be subconsciously or not, is what you're going to is the force that you're going to experience. Like if you do all these things that are terrible for your body, such as like, eating shit food all the time, consuming the news that's full of fear and propaganda and division, and you have to be left or you have to be right. If you consume yourself with like all of this negative energy, I feel like you are going to feel those negative forces. Like, and a lot of people use the term parasitic, and I've used that term for a while now too, because people go, oh, if there was evil, if there were things here that didn't have our best interests at heart, they would have killed us a long time ago. And I feel like that's looking at it through a very human lens, right? Because that's what we like to do as humans. We like to go find a new piece of land, kill everyone that's on it, or just
Right.
remove them. And now it's our land. Okay, that's our ape territorial mindset. But we're dealing with something here that is possibly operating from another dimension, or is either just well beyond our level of like how far we've had advanced. They're well beyond that. So they might be harming us in a way that isn't so like mundane and physical and how we would think it. It could be something that is like psychological or parasitic, something that is like, I mean, the very definition of a parasite, right, is they kind of invade the host and they're then able to manipulate and control and get the host to kind of do what they want. That's what a parasite is. And I feel like the parasitic or the evil forces are likely that they're likely parasitic. So, I mean, I can't speak for someone who's experiencing that, but I do feel like whatever it is, like nothing can fully control your free will. And if you decide to focus on the positive things in life and do the things that are good for you, such as like, trying to eat like relatively healthy. I'm not saying like eat broccoli and chicken every meal, but like as long as you're trying to get some nutrients and vitamins in your body, you're moving your body every day. You don't have to be a gym junkie, but just exercise, be kind to people, try and have empathy for the people around you. Like the more good energy you put out in the world, I feel like the more you will feel connected to that positive presence. So I just really think it works both ways. And I feel like you've probably heard people talk about how humans are, you know, we don't realize our full potential. Like we're capable of so much more. And I
Yep.
think at least the beginning of that potential lies in the realm of the power of our minds, and that wherever we decide to align our intention is the kind of like ethereal and cosmic force and energy that we will then like take on. And that can be like terribly negative and dark. And that's when perhaps people get into these like terrible depressions, or they start doing terrible things to other people in their life. Or you can focus on the light, and you'll then become like a beacon for the people around you. And like sometimes when people walk in the room, you just get like a really good energy, and they're like awesome to be around. They're just radiating like that love and that fun energy. And then
Right.
sometimes someone else can walk in the room and they haven't even said anything, but just their energy and like the look on their face, it's like, oh damn, this guy, like he's not happy, he's not feeling
Right.
good, and it's kind
Bad
of a bit
vibes.
bit dark to be around. Yeah, bad vibes. That is real.
Yep.
Because vibes is short for vibrations, right? And we know that everything is like vibrations and frequency. So
Right.
all of that stuff is real, like good vibes, bad vibes. We can feel that. And I feel like that is I feel like that all falls into this whole thing of like psionics and
I
telepathy.
agree.
And I believe that we all have a sixth sense. Like we all have it. And some people, just like eyesight or hearing, are born with like naturally good eyesight or naturally poor hearing. Well, some people are also naturally born with a good sixth sense, a good level of like
Gifted.
ESP or whatever. Yeah, whatever it is you want to label it, I think we all have it. Some are naturally better than others, but we can all kind of tune into it and work on it. But the fact that it's not part of our education curriculum and that we're not told about it, in fact, when you speak about it, we're told you're just a lunatic, shut up.
Right.
It forces people to just ignore it. And when like these things happen in life where like you're perhaps thinking of someone and they just ring you, or these weird little moments happen, it's always just like, oh, what a coincidence. um when in reality, I think what we're experiencing is some kind of other level of perception that we don't fully understand. And well, some people understand it quite well, but they're seen as like spiritual hippie lunatics, right? Because
Right.
that's the thing that we're told. So, and I think that kind of stuff is also really strong with like specifically like mother and children. Like there does seem to be like this shared consciousness and awareness where like a lot of the time a mother will like just get this weird feeling when their like child is hurt or in trouble or something like that. Like there is this shared
Maternal
connection.
instinct. Yep.
That's right. Like it's out there. There is this like shared consciousness, but everyone is just up until now kind of figuring it out on their own and trying to piece it together without any instruction manual. But I feel like with Jake Barber and the telepathy tapes, what is unfolding right now, and I feel like disclosure is all part of it. I feel like it's all connected. I feel like we're about to start learning about that and understanding it, and people are going to begin to tap into it. And I feel like, and I hope that humanity learning about this and connecting to it is going to be the catalyst for a massive positive change in the world that is going to come packaged with disclosure. That's what I'm hoping, and that's what I'm feeling.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Like they say, I forget the exact percentage, but they say we only use, say, 10%, whatever the actual percentage is. We
Yeah.
only use 10% of our brains. So maybe those people who are gifted or psionics, maybe they're using 15% of their brain. Or maybe why would God or nature or whatever give us 100% of a brain, but cut it off at that we're only using 10%? So do we
It's
need to be
ridiculous.
enlightened before, like, once you attain enlightenment or whatever you want to call it, does that then open up the key to the kingdom? Or your full brain will then reveal what's really happening in the world? It just doesn't make
I
sense to me why we have a brain if we're only using 10% of it. that could be the key to understanding all this. Is once you're enlightened, it opens up the rest of your brain. What do you think about that?
Oh, I totally agree. I got a lot to say about that. I think that, you know, humans were intended to organically and naturally kind of grow and develop and discover ourselves over time. And I feel like at some point in the last, 100-ish years, something took control of our development and decided to suppress some of it. And I believe that was done to kind of create or maintain control. And I feel like we are now at a point where our our development and intuition is because I feel like they've just stopped telling us. Like they kind of reserved some of that knowledge, but it's happening. It's happening either way. And like I just said before, we're now working it out without the instruction manual. We're now trying to discover and figure all these things out, but no one's told us. And I feel like the people in control know about it. I mean, they would Project Stargate in the 70s, they were studying this stuff, but they weren't telling anybody about it. And I feel like a lot of the friction in the world right now is because the people are now realizing that like something isn't right. They're waking up, they're discovering these things in their mind, and like the balance of human evolution versus like society's evolution is out of whack.
Yep.
And I feel like that is what is causing the friction. And what's interesting, actually, look, this book here is called Becoming Supernatural by Dr.
Oh
Joe
wow.
Dispenza. And I mean, you've probably heard of Dr. Joe Dispenza. Like he's a
No.
great
Uh-uh.
um you haven't? You should look him up. So
Yeah, I will.
I get, I would describe him as I mean, he is a doctor, he's a real doctor, but he has kind of dedicated his work to like the fringe of science, right? And he talks about how to, yeah, like rewire your brain, how you can engineer your reality by just like through thought and intention, how you can literally change your world. And a lot of people hear that and they're like, oh, what you can't you can't just think something and everything changes. And it's not that simple. It's about like true belief. It's about like focus and intention. And I've experienced some of this stuff firsthand. And it's interesting that he says, I'm not sure if he says it in this book or maybe he's just said it in like an interview, that a lot of his peers and fellow doctors, he says, they don't necessarily support his work because it's so fringe and it's so against modern medicine, but he says they agree with it, which is interesting because it's like they know that there's something more to our minds and they know that there's something powerful, but to speak out about it, just like many things, is like career suicide, right? And I talk about this a lot, with like Copernicus and Galileo and the whole idea of the Earth not being the center of the universe. Back then was like heretical. These people were like exiled, they were punished for even suggesting such a thing. But then all of a sudden it kind of was like, oh, wait, they were right. But for some reason, rather than being like, oh, maybe we should start to listen to at least consider some new ideas and new ways of thinking, but instead they just shunned these people, and eventually were like, oh shit, they were right. But anyway, if anyone has any new ideas, shut up because we've got it all worked out now. Do you know what I mean? Like they didn't change the way they're
Exactly.
thinking, and
Right.
they
We
still
didn't know
haven't.
half the stuff we know now until we learned it. So we don't know everything. There's still a ton more to learn, but it seems like we've shut ourselves off from wondering about the unknown and making new science.
That's right. It's just crazy that anyone who suggests something different to modern science is immediately a conspiracy theorist. Not like, oh, that's an interesting possibility. Like, let's try and look into that more. It's just like, no, you're disrupting. And Graham Hancock is experiencing the same thing
Yep.
with archaeology. He's has a very compelling case for a lot of things that don't make sense, yet he's seen as heretical. He's a heretic for modern archaeology because he's disrupting the modern paradigm. But I'm sure it won't be too long until people are going just like Galileo and Copernicus, that like, oh shit, Graham was right. We should have listened to him.
Right. Like we thought the battle for Troy was mythology for how many years from the Iliad and
Yep.
Odyssey, and it just became known somewhat recently, Troy was a real place. There was a real battle there. And maybe it might have been embellished a little bit, through the Iliad, but it was a real thing. So, like similar to Graham Hancock, we don't know what we don't know. We thought Troy was a fake place until just a few years ago. So what
Yep.
Graham Hancock could be saying, and he presents a lot of compelling theories and also a lot of evidence to back up his theories. But there's like people have a toehold in the archaeology business now where we can't upset the apple cart and we can't accept new theories because it might upend what I wrote a book on or I wrote a paper on or what's established precedent. And so I hope Graham Hancock continues doing what he's doing because he's opening up a lot of people's minds. And same thing for Billy Carson on Egypt, and there's a lot of people out there doing great work, just putting new theories forward. And you know, what's the harm in testing these theories out? Why don't the establishment archaeology people say, all right, well, let's see if this is true or not. Let's dive into it and start digging or start whatever they have to do to try to prove this right or wrong. But they put up doors and they put up walls instead of collaborating.
Yeah, I fully agree. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. It's like this primitive way of thinking where rather than being excited that someone else is helping build on your work, you're panicking that they're going to like ruin you. Where it's like, no, it doesn't work like that. Like you're projecting your own insecurities onto the
Right.
whole scope of archaeology, where no one's going to think you're an idiot or wrong because what you have discovered has now evolved. In fact, I think it would be the other way. People would see you as like the pioneer, the foundations of our discovery. And,
Right.
also what's stopping you from writing a new book? Build on your work, and I just think it's this primitive human mind that hopefully is either going to eventually die off or just evolve, where we can then begin to accept that, yeah, we don't know everything, and that's okay. In fact, it's exciting. It's exciting that we're still discovering things.
Yeah,
It's a great thing.
exactly. Why are you not excited about it like we are?
Yeah.
It could open up a whole new world. We might, and I think it's all part of the human condition and our flaws of ego and pride and greed and all that. It's preventing us from, getting to that place of enlightenment.
Yes, and all of those emotions and states that you just mentioned, like ego, pride, fear, they're all low vibrational states. And that this is what I'm saying. Like this whole, like we're now getting like a proper sort of, I feel like we're getting like a handbook from the government slowly that is saying like, no, this stuff is actually real. Like learn to raise your consciousness, raise your vibration, and you will no longer be stuck in this like fear-based lifestyle where you're worried everyone's like, oh, you don't align with my political beliefs. Ah, you're the enemy, or you're disagreeing with
Right.
my archaeological understanding. Enemy. Like, no, that's not the case. Like, we are all one, and once you bring your mindset out of those negative emotions, you start to see the world completely differently. You don't start to panic that people are going to ruin your work. You start to get excited that we are evolving and getting
Right.
a greater understanding. It's literally comes down to humans individually, like just lifting that vibration up. And I genuinely feel like theoretically, if tomorrow we could somehow do that, the whole world would shift very quickly because,
I agree.
like I said, everyone's perspective and mindset creates their version of reality. And if everyone's mindset shifted, it would actually shift the whole world very quickly.
Yeah, I think there's a whole new world to discover, and the only thing preventing us from discovering it is ourselves. And I do wonder,
Exactly.
why do you think the government is starting to come forward a little bit now? I find that a little concerning. Like, is there an event that's going to take place in the relative soon future that they're trying to get us ready for? Like, why all of a sudden, after 80 years of a cover up, are they slowly starting to reveal the truth? Now, is it because of the internet and that we're all connected and talking and pressure is building? But I don't think there's that much pressure on them. like my parents and all my friends, like they don't really give a crap. And I think it's the same for most people. Or is there some perilous event coming that they're slowly getting us conditioned for? What are your thoughts on that?
I think they certainly at least think there's something coming. Um, and they're obviously in a position to know more than us. So how much weight you want to put on that, I guess, is up to you. But I certainly think they're under the belief. I mean, Danny Sheehan spoke to Yale University last year, telling them that, like, literally verbatim to the so. And not only is he speaking at Yale, he was obviously approved by the staff at Yale to be there to say what he's saying, and he's saying this to the scholars of one of the most respected universities in the world, that verbatim, a non-human intelligence is coming to intervene to prevent a thermonuclear war, and we need to be prepared to retain as much autonomy and sovereignty over our like governmental structures as possible. Like that is pretty much word for word what is being told to scholars at the top universities right now. Like it's crazy. So
Right.
obviously somebody or a group that is quite high up very much believes that something is coming. Whether it's to intervene and stop war, or it's whatever it is, I think it's going to. I think it's going to kickstart a new age, or I might actually rephrase that as like a new version of religion. And it's funny because like through the years, often people have assimilated like UFOs and the whole interest and study of UFOs as a religion, because it's like people are kind of as obsessed and like believe in it as hard as people do in Christianity or in
Yep.
any other religion, because it's like blind faith, right? That we don't have proof, we can't prove it, but we know it's there, we believe in it. And it's interesting that the study of UFOs is now bringing us to this point that it feels like there is going to be some kind of intervention that's going to raise our consciousness and is going to unify people and create this like unconditional belief. I mean, if something does come and intervene, it's going to be very undeniable, right? We should, from at least how I would assume, we're all going to be able to see it, and it's going to potentially like shake the world up. It's going to
Right.
make people go, "Holy shit, my sports team is not important." Like there are actually something much more bigger than us out there, and I think that's going to kickstart some form of new religion, whether people just flock back to their normal churches and we stick with Christianity and whatever else, or perhaps we kind of then unify under like one religion, or and that kind of then that is beginning to sound like a one world government, a new world
Right.
order, which
And
is
that's what a
a
lot of
big.
people have predicted.
Yeah, and I think in one of my recent videos, I highlighted that and I suggested like, is that such a bad thing? Well, it depends, right? It depends. I mean, does a one world government mean everyone is kind of now unified and like, there is absolutely zero tolerance of any like, like it like imagine if it was like if you can't play nice with anybody, then like you don't belong here. And and I mean that in like in the harshest way. Like if you are
Yeah,
not going to
that's
play
what it would
nice,
take.
yeah. And is I mean that's a very strong point to make. But imagine if that was the case. It's like, hey, if you can't play nice in on this earth, you will not exist on this earth. And like that's a very uh harsh way to deal with things. But perhaps we would need that for a little while to be like, hey, everyone get in line. Otherwise, this whole thing is not going to work. Okay. So, and you could be like, wow, that's like a totalitarian dictatorship, new world order. And it's like, yeah, you could look at it like that. And let me be clear, I'm not advocating for the new world order here,
Get
but
yourself in trouble.
I'm just trying to explore the possibility that it
Right.
might not necessarily be a bad thing. Because you look
Agree.
at countries like Singapore, for example. if you spit chewing gum on the floor in Singapore, you go to jail. Like they don't play around over there. And it's one of the most neatest, tidiest, low crime rate countries in the world. But to get to that point of like this harmony, they had to enforce some pretty strict
We need
rules. Like you don't mess
consequences.
around. Yeah, that's right. So yeah, if if that's what it took, and we did then get a world, like if you had to enforce the rules that hard to make sure no, everyone's in line, but as a result of that, now that we know there's nobody nefarious, no one's trying to do anything crazy, there's no terrorist attacks, now we get free energy. Now we can have these craft that will take you from London to Australia in 20 seconds
Right.
because we trust that no one's going to take this technology and use it to drop a nuclear bomb on the White
Right.
House
It's
or
what the
something, right?
world could be if it wasn't for humans screwing it up.
That's right. But they can't give you that. They can't give us that unless there is this trust that we're not going to go crazy with it. So to gain that trust, maybe there does have to be some strict rules. But in saying that, obviously, because I want to be objective here, because I'm not, I'm exploring the possibilities. If we then unify and say, yep, okay, let's accept this. The world is now one. We don't see each other as different countries. We see each other as just kind of different areas of one Earth. But now it's like, oh, we got to fund the global military, the Space Force, because there's an intergalactic threat, and now half your wages need to go to the military industrial complex. Then I don't think, that to me is just more of the same. Now we're living the same way on a galactic scale rather than just a planetary scale. So yeah, it depends, right? It depends how it would work, how it would come, and yeah, maybe life would change in some ways where it's like, oh, you really can't misbehave anymore, but in trade for that, there's now no poverty on Earth. There's now no rat race of having to grind 40 out, 70% of your life
Right.
every week just to earn enough dollars to like
To
get a
live.
get a happy meal on the weekend. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
it's just and that's something I've always had a bit of an issue with as well from like a young age. Like I remember being very young and saying to my dad like why do you have to go to work, and like why do I have to go to work one day? And he was just kind of like, well, that's just the way the world is. And I I remember saying to him like, I didn't ask for this. Like I didn't ask to be
Right.
here, and now I'm forced to like kind of be like a wage slave, which is
Participate
a
in this
pretty like
rat race.
yeah, which is a pretty like profound thought to have when I was like 6 or 7 years old, and that's kind of stuck with me. And that stance has really never shifted because the whole concept of spending the majority of your life just to earn. I mean, not for everyone, but for the majority of people on Earth, you fight. To use an analogy, you fight and grind through the week to get enough of these socially constructed dollar bills or
Right. That
digital
don't mean
imaginary.
anything.
That's right, or just to get enough digital numerals in your bank account that's not even physical to then be able to have a roof over your head and to go and do stuff.
Exactly.
Like it is primitive. I think it's very primitive, but at the same time, yes, we might have the technology to take us into a new age beyond that, but there are things in the world or people and groups in the world that are potentially a risk that if they had that technology, they could do something completely devastating with it.
Oh, we
So, like,
would. We
I kind of get it.
absolutely would.
Yeah. So I kind of get it in a way, but yeah. So I guess the whole one world government thing, it's an interesting concept, and I think people should just be aware of the fact that, yes, it's always posed as some kind of like negative totalitarian thing, but it actually could be what is necessary to take us into a new age. Like, and I don't just mean like a new decade. I mean like an actual new age of like the world being like the Jetsons, where people are zipping around in their own UFOs, and you know what I mean? Like it's a complete different
Right.
world, but you need that trust to get there.
And I think we need something because if something big doesn't happen, I do fear we are going to destroy ourselves and we're going to destroy the planet in not too long of a time. I think we just have to hope so. I agree. Something big, I believe, is coming. I keep hearing the year 2027. Other people say 2025, but either way, it's very soon. And I think people are starving for something to believe in. like you were just saying, we're leading meaningless lives. I think if people were living in cabins in the woods, I don't think half of the issues that we're having would be going on because people would have a purpose in life. Okay, I got to fix the roof, or I got to go out and hunt today, or I got to whatever to keep the family going. I think humans have lost that sense of purpose. So I think they're just starving for something to believe in. And I think that's a lot of, not to get political, but I think a lot of that is Trump. I'm not saying for better or worse, but I think people are just so starved for a purpose and something to believe in. And they're not happy with the way society is going because we're just leading meaningless, unpurposed lives that we're just going to work at some job we hate for 8 to 10 hours a day. We barely have enough to keep the lights on or keep food in the fridge, and people are starving for something more. So I could see hopefully these things, whatever they are, if they do come, hopefully they are looking out for our best interests, and they're not looking to destroy us or. But I could see how people would be okay with the one world government if that was the case. And but it would take in the short term, it would be pretty ugly. So we would need those massive consequences because otherwise people wouldn't go for it.
I agree, and I feel like every great shift in humanity is never seamless. It's never easy, and I feel like anything in life, right? Like any big change is turbulent and it's not quick. It's kind of, either whether it's a war or it's, just a time of like conflict and people really struggling. If you can make it out the other side, it's almost always a positive result.
Right. Absolutely. Like there was pre-World War II, and then there was World War II, which was terrible, and that's how we judge history: pre-World War II, post-World War II, and then there was the Renaissance after World War II, and the Roman Empire fell. It was the Dark Ages for how many years, and then we had the Renaissance, and so yeah, it takes a moment of, or not a moment, but decades or centuries, whatever, of a turbulent time and a time of hardship until we come out into a new age, like you said, and come out on the other side.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like, the people like me and you who can identify that the world is like, our lives are somewhat meaningless to a degree right now, and that the way the world is just not a good way. I feel like that kind of ties back to what I was saying before, in that like at this point now, we've been sort of, this rat race has been running for quite a long time now, but the evolution of people's awareness and minds that's happening, whether they want to control us or not, that's slowly going up and up and up. It's now getting to a point where people are becoming so aware and they're so sick of it, and that I feel like that is also part of this friction that's happening right now, is that the people don't want a meaningless life. They want to feel at least like they're being treated fairly and that there's equal opportunity. And that goes for kind of all walks of life, really. And I think, yeah, that's a kind of a source of this shift that's happening right now.
Yeah, and I hope something happens. I'm ready to learn the truth. So I'm hoping we see a bunch of flying saucers come out pretty soon and say, we're finally here, guys. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully they don't come out with laser guns like in War of the Worlds or something, though.
I hope not. I absolutely hope not.
No. Hey, worst case, I always tell people stock up on food, stock up on water, medication, whatever else you might need. Worst comes to worst case, we keep on living how we're living and you got some extra food and water. But whether it be aliens or whether it be a climate disaster or a war or whatever, just stock up on provisions and hope for the best, but be prepared for the worst.
Yeah, totally agree with that.
So, you did a great show on the Galactic Federation, which I hear so much about on Twitter, and I posted on Twitter, and I don't know anything about it, but I posted on Twitter, like, I don't want to hear another word about the Galactic Federation until one of their motherships lands in my front yard. Do you think there is something to it? Because I watched your show, and it opened my eyes up a little bit when the sources that you listed in your show that did say there was something to. I'm like, wow, I didn't know that, and it made me change the way I thought of it. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there like me that just see people talking about it on social media but don't know what it is. Could you give us a little a quick history on what exactly the Galactic Federation may be?
Sure. Um, well, I guess I'll try and keep it in like chronological order of how the information sort of came out. So the first person of sort of a respectable credibility to really speak out about this was Paul Hellyer. So who I mentioned earlier, he was the ex-minister of defense for Canada, and he was heavily involved in the government during Pierre Trudeau's time as well. So super high up, super involved, and after his career, he came out and began publicly stating that, it's kind of accepted within those tight circles that there are multiple species here interacting and visiting Earth. Um, I can't actually remember if he specifically. I think he does. I do think he actually does use the term a galactic federation. And then in 2020, we had Haim Eshed, who was the leader of Israel's space program, but also a brigadier general in Israel's military. So again, a brigadier general. It's like super. He's not just like, he's not just a grunt. He's not, and even he's not just like a lieutenant. He is brigadier general, right up there. 30 years, multiple awards, very highly respected man. In an interview with the Jerusalem Post, said that the Galactic Federation is real. And like he said some crazy shit. Like he said that the United States are like, not only are they aware of it, but they have the United States in conjunction with non-human intelligence have bases here on Earth and
Oh,
underground bases on Mars, which,
whoa.
it's very like, yes, you hear that and you're like, oh yeah, okay, we've got bases on Mars, but it's like, dude, I'm not telling you that. The guy who ran Israel's space program for 30 years is saying that. So
Right.
again,
What
it
motive
brings us
does he
back to,
have to make that up? Like zero.
yeah, exactly. And it brings us back to where we were before. Either this brigadier general who's super high up is lying to the world, that's concerning,
For no
or what he's
reason.
saying is, yeah, for no reason, or or the only reason or outcome really is tarnishing his reputation, right? Because no one's reading that. He didn't say that, and now all of a sudden, all the mainstream news outlets are going, "Well, guys, it turns out we've got bases on Mars." No, that's not what happened at all. It got ignored, and most people who read it go, "Oh yeah, what a lunatic." So there's no gain to be made there, and a few things in that article that came out were him saying, if I'd have said this, 5 years ago, I probably would have gone to prison. But he said times are beginning to change now. He said Trump is aware of this, and Trump wanted to disclose it in his last presidency, but he said the Galactic Federation didn't want him to avoid causing mass hysteria, and they wanted to wait until people understand what space and spaceships actually are. So
Makes sense.
that's a super interesting quote, right? And it's very interesting that one, Trump has just come in and basically it was the day before the inauguration that we got the first Jake Barber interview. And what did we get in the Jake Barber interview? We got a man telling us that through our consciousness and our mind, we can connect to these things in the sky that we've been calling spaceships or UFOs. But now we're actually learning that there's some kind of like consciousness connection to them. So it seems like we are beginning to learn what space and spaceships are. And Trump has just come back in. There's this huge push for disclosure. Like it really feels like it is unraveling. Like I said earlier, people say, oh, we've heard it all before. We've heard that it's coming. It's like, dude, open your eyes. It is very different
It's
right now.
different. Yeah, it's definitely,
Very
definitely
different.
different. And I think Lou
Yeah.
Elizondo, I think, I could be wrong, but I think he came out during the first Trump administration. So that would be another military person
Yeah.
kind of maybe coming out and laying the groundwork for us to learn more about spaceships
Yeah.
and whatever else. So kind
And
of makes
also,
sense.
and in that first presidency, which is when Haim Eshed said that Trump knew and wanted to disclose it, it was in that first presidency that Trump created the Space Force, which was the very first new branch of the military since the Air Force was created in World War II. Like
Right.
that's not a you don't just do that, okay? Like
That's what
why
I
did he
thought.
do that?
Can't be
Why
a
did he do that?
coincidence.
No, like
And like Donald
there's
Trump, who
literally
like doesn't, he has no woo. Like he's not the type of guy to sit around like smoking a joint or drinking a beer and talking about aliens. He's not that type of guy. He's not the type of guy.
yeah,
He's interested in, I'm a businessman. I'm interested in what's in front of me on the boardroom table. He's not a space guy, really. So for him to do that, there had to be a good reason for him to create Space
I agree.
Force. So it make
I agree.
it just if you just take off any preconceived notions you might have and just follow the trail, follow the data, follow the train of events, it really could only lead you to one conclusion that something is going on. I don't know what that something is, but something is obviously happening.
Yeah, it certainly seems like from a lot of different angles, there is this. I actually likened it to like before you go to war. Not, I hope that we're not going to war, but like when, like the tanks and the troops are moving up to the front line and everyone's kind of getting ready and in position, like ready for that front line to, go out and attack. That's what it kind of feels like because there's all, the Space Force is happening. We're learning about, like through Diana Walsh Pasolka, like the ties that are there to religion, Jake Barber and consciousness. Like we're learning about all of these different elements that surround the phenomenon, and they're all kind of happening at the same time. And it all seems like they're all creeping up to this convergence point, and it feels like at one point it's when like the penny's going to drop, and it's going to be like, okay, yeah, there it is. This is what we're dealing with here, and I feel like that's what we're working towards now.
Yep, I agree. I think we're on the road to somewhere, and I think there's an endpoint finally in sight. Don't know when exactly that is, but I think it's going to be relatively soon. Great discussion. So, have you been following the whistleblowers? And if so, who do you seem to, not that we're picking teams like we were saying before or anything, but who do you think has maybe advanced the cause of disclosure and is sharing good information?
I'd have to say I don't think like what regardless of what you think about him, I don't think you can argue that Lou Elizondo has probably been one of the key figures that has brought us to where we are today. And I've been, and I think fairly, and I feel like even Lou would say fairly, like I've been not critical of him at times, but I've been like skeptical about, where he comes from, what his background is, the the whole idea. I've noticed he doesn't do it as much these days, but for a while it seemed like that he really used the word threat a lot, which I had a
Right,
problem with because I used to say like, well, obviously like the military by definition, right? When they can't identify something, it's a threat. I mean, like in the video I did with Robert Dean, he says the military is trained to be paranoid because that's like their job, right? They're there to protect. So any potential unknown, it's
yeah,
treated as a threat,
yep,
which which is great when you're dealing with other humans potentially harming your country because we understand humans. We get it. We know what their species are like. But if we're now talking about potentially being introduced to a complete different species, I don't think getting the paranoid guy that wants to attack anything that they don't know is the best ambassador for humans, right? Because they're now
absolutely.
now this species is like coming here or engaging with us and they're like, whoa, these guys are fucking paranoid and freaking out. Every, every time we try to go near them, they're shooting nuclear weapons at us and trying to take our craft down. Like that is not the right ambassador for us. I appreciate their approach and I understand their position, but I feel like that doesn't it, it shouldn't apply, or at least there should be some kind of like other consultancy when it comes to something that isn't human.
I agree. The military might not be the best representative to deal
Definitely
with
not.
NHI. We might need like philosophers, scientists, people like that would probably be a much better representative than some general in the military who's coming at it from a military perspective. Now, there might need to be a group of people, in a general or whatever, being among the group. But yeah,
Mm.
I would definitely agree with that for sure. Um,
Yeah, I mean, like this. John Blitch was talking about how like our skies, like we think our skies are like restricted airspace when like so as soon as anything enters, we're like firing on it. And
right.
he assimilated like humans or to where we are now. We're kind of like if we're looking at a galactic level, if anything is sort of coming to our Earth or our area, we're like killer bees. Like anything that comes near us, we're like stinging. We're trying to kill and take out. So like it's almost it could get to a point where people just get sick of us. We're like, we can't cooperate. We're not a species that can coexist. So if we're going to continue to cause problems, it's like if you have killer bees near your house and you try and avoid them as much as you can, but every time you go near them, because sometimes you
Spray the
have to go
bug
near them.
spray.
That's right. Maybe they're on your way to work and you kind of have to go near their nest a little bit every time you go to work every day. But every time you do, they're just fucking stinging you and you're
Right.
just trying to walk past. Right. So eventually you're going to be like, screw these guys. I'm getting the bug spray, kill them all. You know what
Right,
I mean? Like that
exactly.
is, I feel like that is a great analogy which John Blitch used to potentially like where we are versus like a honeybee, which is like they're kind of peaceful. If you go in and disturb their area and piss them
Right,
off, they'll rightly so be like, hey, get the fuck away from us. But
right.
they pollinate the plants, they serve a purpose, and they coexist with everything. So yeah, I think we just need to dial down the aggression and perhaps get other people involved in what this first contact looks like.
I agree because when you look at Earth, like Earth is such a special place. Like it's just it's almost a miracle. I'm sure there's other we can get into that. There's trillions of planets out there, but Earth is like the perfect breeding ground of life. So if they are interested in our planet, to be honest, probably the best thing they could do for the planet is to wipe out humanity because I mean we destroy any not and obviously there's exceptions, but as a whole, throughout history, we've done nothing but kill each other, kill anything weaker than us. Now we have the technology to actually destroy the planet. So if they are interested in the planet and not necessarily us, doesn't bode well for humanity. And I couldn't say I argue with their logic.
Yeah, no, I get that, but I think it's also important to understand as well that like, you know, it's unfortunate that like the small percentage that have this kind of aggressive and paranoid outlook are the ones that have the weapons, right? That like they don't really represent humanity. They
Right.
represent kind of well, they just kind of really represent themselves, which unfortunately are the ones that will be the face and the people who are there to make the first contact. So in a way, that small percentage does represent us on like a galactic scale because that is who is there to open the front door to whatever comes here.
Exactly.
But it's not a good reflection of what the world is. And because of that, if we are going back to the, spiritual things of like good and evil and things that are here to help elevate our consciousness and help us evolve in a positive way, then I would like to assume and think that they know that and they understand that. And that is perhaps why we are, yes, so that we are getting this like some kind of assistance to help people like open their mind, raise their consciousness, shift away from the negative vibrations of fear and anger and resentment and jealousy, and just evolve, literally evolve our minds and become a much more like empathetic and understanding colony of this planet.
I agree. And if they like, so those people being our representatives, it's almost inevitable because now to get into position of power, the powers that be have made it so you have to buy into that system and you have to play by those rules or else you're not going to get elected. You're not going to raise the money. They're going to run primary challengers against you if you're not playing ball. So it's almost inevitable that if people from government are the ones making first contact, it is going to be those people who are representing the interests of Wall Street in the military industrial complex, rather than the cool people just out for a hike on the trail, like you say, touching the grass. And, that's, I think, really the majority of what's going on Earth is people like that rather than the people that might be representing us in the first contact. So, like you said, I do hope they have a bigger view and they see that it's just not the people in power on Earth that, there's a lot of people out there who disagree and just want to live in peace as well. But that was really interesting.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like we're stuck. We're literally stuck in the way that things are. And you know, if we're to agree with that we are stuck, then it makes complete sense what Danny Sheehan is saying at Yale University, that we are getting an intervention because we are stuck. Like humanity,
Right.
yeah, like the only way humanity could have like a drastic change is probably via a thermonuclear war, like via some drastic thing that like eradicated half of the population to so then there could be like a new control. But obviously we don't want that. So the only other way out that I can really think of is an intervention that goes, hey, it's like stop, just stop killing each other, and you know you're better than that. You're all better than that. This is how. And
There's a better
I
way
mean,
towards
yeah,
enlightenment.
exactly, exactly. And hopefully, you know, if something is coming, a big world event, hopefully it's something like that is not going to, you know, wipe half the people off the face of the earth, but it's going to show people that there is a lot more to this universe than watching Love Island and hating each other for supporting a different political figure.
Exactly. I agree. So, moving on to a little bit of a lighter topic, what advice would you give somebody getting into UAP research today?
Um, well, I'd probably say that it's like kind of what we said before, in that you don't need to subscribe to any of these ideas. Like these are all different pieces of the same puzzle. Some of them fit together, some of them don't. But the ones that don't fit together might soon. You know what I mean? Like it's like literally when
Absolutely.
you're doing a jigsaw puzzle, you might put a few pieces together and you're like, oh yeah, they fit. That makes sense. And then you get a few more and you're like, man, this piece is wild. I don't know where this piece goes. It doesn't mean that piece doesn't belong in this jigsaw puzzle. You just put it over there for now, and in 2, 3, or 5 years, you might find another piece that fits with that. And now all of a sudden, you're
Right.
getting a broader scope of the whole jigsaw. And I think that's exactly what this whole thing is like. So again, don't be the people on Twitter who, when they find a piece they don't recognize, they start screaming at it and saying this piece doesn't belong here. Just,
Right. Think about it like
just
that. When you're doing a puzzle, you don't go throw
that's
the
right.
pieces of the puzzle in the garbage and scream and
That's
rip them
right.
up.
That's right. You just put it to the side, and eventually, when you get a few more pieces together, you'll probably find where that one fits. So yeah, that would be my advice, to just take everything with a grain of salt, even the things that sound so outrageous that they're hard to believe. You know, there's been a lot of examples of people who have said some things over the years that you're just like, wow, that is very hard to believe. But you know, and when I've come across them, yeah, like I probably don't focus on it too much because it's so hard to digest, but I don't dismiss it. I just kind of put it over there. And it's amazing how many times 5 or 10 years down the line, you rewatch that video or you hear something new and you're like, oh, that actually kind of completely aligns with where we're at now. Like it
Right.
makes it aligns with everything else that's in the conversation now. So yeah,
Right.
I think just don't be too quick to make judgment on things.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. You might like watch something tomorrow that confirms something you watched, a documentary you saw 2 years ago. Like, oh my God, holy shit, that just confirms what this guy said, or whatever.
Yeah,
But I think that's absolute great advice. Keep an open mind. Don't be too critical. Just take everything in and filter it as you need to filter it. And whatever you don't agree with right now, like you just said, put it to the side for later. And eventually, there's a good chance it's going to fit. So I
absolutely. Yeah.
appreciate
And
that.
that's
That was great advice. Yeah. No, continue.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I feel like I've always kind of had a bit of a knack for like pattern recognition on things, over like really vast spans of time as well. Like, I'll see somebody and I'll be like, oh wow, you look like that one person I met like 10 years ago at like a restaurant or something. You know what I mean? Like, very weird connections seem to just like pop into my mind. And I feel like perhaps that's something that's helped me get deep into this, because I do recognize that I'm like, oh, what that little like sentence that someone said in this hour-long podcast is exactly what someone said in an interview in the 80s. So like, and that's just obviously a personal thing for me, but there are a lot of dots to be connected that span
Exactly.
decades in this subject.
Exactly. I say that all the time. You just got to connect the dots. It's an ever evolving puzzle to put together. It's extremely difficult. I don't know if we'll ever have the complete puzzle put together, but it sure is a lot of fun putting the pieces together. And when you're working
It is.
towards the biggest revelation and the biggest subject that humanity has ever faced, or the biggest question humanity could ever answer is, are we alone? Who are they? What are they? What are their intentions? And it's a worthy puzzle to keep on putting together, to keep working on.
Oh, dude, I'm proud of myself for coming up with that jigsaw analogy just then
Yeah,
because I
that was
love it because
great.
it's exciting because like, people do jigsaws in real life for a bit of stimulation, for some fun, for something to do. This really is like the biggest jigsaw puzzle of all time, and it's real and it affects all of us, and it is exciting because like I don't watch Netflix. I don't really watch any of that stuff because to me this is like a reality kind of TV version, but it's real, and we
Right.
get to we get to do our own investigation and digging and finding all the pieces ourselves and try to put it all together. Like to me, this is the most fun and like exciting and impactful story. And that's, I guess, why it's like kind of mind blowing that people just aren't interested in it because if it's going to affect everyone and it's unraveling in real time. And yeah, you could either take the position of trying to scream at finding all the wrong pieces and having a negative experience through all of this, or you could just be enjoying, picking up the pieces and seeing if this one fits. Maybe it doesn't. Look for the next piece. Like it's depends.
Right.
It's just total perspective and mindset on how you want to approach this. But for me, I'm having a great time, and it's exciting, it's fun, and it's interesting, and I'm excited for what comes.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. I'm excited every morning to open up Twitter. Did any new whistleblowers come forward? Is there any new information that came out that I didn't know yesterday? So it's a purpose every day to work towards, and that's pretty cool. So, what impact do you hope Polarity has on viewers?
Uh, Overall, a positive one. That's for me is the main thing I want. Like I do talk about divisive things on my channel sometimes, but in a way, I kind of do it intentionally to then give an example of how you cannot let it divide you. Like we don't need to pick sides. I try to use these real life divisive issues, but put my own spin on it and show people that like you don't, picking a side here is primitive, especially with something like this that is incomplete, right? We don't have the full picture. So I want people who watch my channel to learn stuff. I want to stimulate their minds and just get them thinking. And one of the main things on my channel is that I will never tell people what to think, but I will try to tell them to think because I feel like decades of just not thinking and just accepting the way things are has kind of allowed people who evidently don't have yours or my best interest at heart run away with whatever they're doing, and now we are where we are because people haven't been thinking or asking questions or applying pressure in places that it should be. So yeah, I think I want people to come to my channel, have a positive experience, learn something, have fun. I often like joke and, take the piss out of myself and other people because you should be able to like take the piss out of people in a fun way, not in a mean way,
Right.
but just have fun, have a laugh, learn something and open their mind up a little.
Yeah, and you're really good at it, man. I really hope people that watch this go over and check out your channel because you really are doing fantastic work over there. What could you tell us? What's coming up for Polarity? What's next? Where do you hope to see your channel in the next few years?
Oh, first of all, thanks, man. I really appreciate that. In the next few years, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because I have actually thought about this recently because I was like, if disclosure is happening, like I think it is, I was like, what do I do when when it's done. like what is polarity when everyone
Now
knows
what?
aliens are real and everyone knows UFOs? Like, what am I going to talk about then? But I think there'll always be something to talk about. And, I kind of started off my channel really focusing on like the editing and like the cool like visuals and stuff like that. And pretty quickly I realized, one, that I don't like editing, like I really don't enjoy that. And two, I was like, I'm also not that good at it. So I was like, and I was beginning to understand that, and this is, in a way, this is just kind of, sometimes things just come to me. I don't know if you get that too, but like sometimes it's like you just kind of like all of a sudden it just kind of clicks in your mind. And for me, it was like, people are really enjoying what I'm telling them. They're enjoying the content, but I think the pillar of my channel is actually kind of me. Like it's not the editing. It's like, no, I've never had a comment saying, wow, I love the editing. I love the visual effects. Like, no one cares about that. And that's a benefit for me because I don't enjoy doing it either. And that's why I've started to film my shows just in one take. I don't do any editing. I may down the line do some different videos where I, like, for example, when I go take my GoPro down to the park and shoot that, I might just do a couple of little things, but I'm not going to be spending time on like the little zoom ins and cut in and out and all that kind of stuff because I just don't think it's worth it. So I think, given that I kind of understand now that, I'm lucky that I think people are there because they're interested in the topic, but I think people just kind of enjoy my personality, which I'm so grateful for. And honestly, like like I had like honestly like an emotional moment at like the early days because, like I said to you, there was so much self-doubt in my mind that like I'm not good enough and I'm not interesting and people aren't going to like me, that it was like very hard to even get started, and that my girlfriend was the one that really pushed me to do it. And then to just immediately have this like response that was just so positive and way beyond what I expected was like emotional, because I was like, oh my God, like, you are enough. Like you are, there's nothing wrong with you. People do like you. People do like, people are interested in what you have to say. And that was like, yeah, it was like emotional for me. Um, so I think I'm really grateful for that. And, if one day we all do have disclosure and, no one needs to learn about aliens stuff anymore, then I would love to just maybe keep doing YouTube. Like, another passion of mine is traveling. Maybe I'd love to, keep my personality involved, but go around the world. Like, I mean, even in Polarity, I would love to go to the pyramids and just take my GoPro around and just talk about.
Right. Yeah, people would love it.
So, yeah, I think I Polarity, at least for the foreseeable future, I'll just keep on doing what I'm doing. But who knows? Maybe one day, I could take people around the world with me or do something fun or interesting like that.
Yeah, I think that would be great. If that day ever comes, people would definitely come with you because, like you said, your personality, you got a great personality. It shines through on the screen, and that's why the people are coming back time and again, because you're just a really good host. And like you put in your bio, you're guiding them through this subject. You're doing a great job at it. And I thank you for coming on this show. This is my first interview I've ever done. So I hope I did okay at it. I hope all you guys out there enjoyed it. Josh, I hope I was a good host. Did I do all right?
Yeah, it was great, man. I really enjoyed the chat. How long have we been doing this? Nearly 3 hours?
Nearly 3 hours. Yeah, wow. Exactly. So it doesn't seem like I think we had a really good flow of conversation.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, man. Thank you for having me on. And it was a pleasure to be your very first guest. I'm sure there'll be many more to come.
Yep, I'm honored, man. So that's a wrap for today's episode, everybody. A huge thank you to Josh for joining us, sharing his insights on the ever-evolving UAP discussion. If you haven't already, be sure to check out his show, Polarity, on YouTube for more deep dives into the unknown. And if you get a second after that, you can give my channel a like and subscribe as well. I'd appreciate it. So as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, share. Let's keep the conversation going. Stay curious, keep questioning, and we'll see you next time on Beyond Top Secret.